Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Health, Environment, Civil Rights, and Engagement Committee. My name is Philippe Cunningham, and I am the proud council member of the 4th Ward and chair of this committee. With me at the dais are council members Cano, Schrader, the vice chair, council member Gordon, as well as council member Johnson. Please let the record reflect that we have a quorum of the committee and can conduct its business. Today we have 5 items, 1 public hearing, and 1, 2, 3, 4 consent items. We'll first go through the consent agenda. Go ahead and pass that, and then we'll move into the public hearing. So first we have on the consent agenda approving the mayoral appointments for 2-year term beginning this year, ending at the end of next year, of Chief Arredondo and Sheriff Hutchinson. Also approving the council appointment for a 2-year term for Jennifer White, a 1-year term council appointment for Lance Lamont, and authorizing a waiver of residency requirement for the chief and sheriff. Item number 2 on the consent is gift acceptance from Metro State for facility use for the Urban Scholars Program. Number 4 is authorizing the submittal of a U.S. Department of Health and Human Services First Responder Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act grant, allowing first responders and members of other key community sectors to administer a drug or device approved or cleared under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act for emergency treatment of known or suspected opioid overdose. And our last consent agenda item is accepting reimbursement dollars for the amount up to $149,800 from urban scholar organizations. I would like to acknowledge that we have had Council Vice President Jenkins join us. And with that, I move approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and those items have passed. Next up, we have a very exciting item that I think a lot of folks maybe are here to talk about. So I will invite up NCR Director David Rubador. Today we have the Neighborhoods 2020 Framework Recommendations. We have a presentation that will be followed by a public hearing. Mr. Rubador, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Chair Cunningham and committee members. Good afternoon. As Chair Cunningham mentioned, I am David Rubador, the Director of the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department, and I'm here today to present the recommended 2020 Neighborhoods 2020 framework. I want to first off start off by saying thank you to all the community residents who are here today. This is obviously an important topic. This has been a big conversation through our community. And what I'll do today is present basically about the process that led us to where we're at, the reason why we're doing this, and then also what our recommendations are that are being brought forth for your consideration. First of all, the requested council action is the passage of the resolution approving the Neighborhoods 2020 framework recommendations. I do know that the committee chair also has an amendment to this that we'll be discussing at the end, but that's basically what is before us today. I wanted to start off a little different than what I normally do in my presentation. I wanted to include a quote here that I thought was really relevant for our discussion. This is a big issue for the city, and our neighborhood organizations hold a lot of passion, and a lot of people are personally connected to them. And I think this quote really kind of captures the essence of what we're trying to do. And specifically, the quote is, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everybody. We know that Minneapolis has gained national and even international acclaim for our neighborhoods, for their vibrancy, for their activism, and for their engagement. Our neighborhoods serve in their own ways as small towns that help to create a better city. I know this because I got my start in public service actually working for a neighborhood a number of years ago. I think this quote is relevant because it speaks to the power of residents in building the city, and it really puts people at the center of this work, which is really vital to understand that. It also speaks to the need to include everyone, which is some of the recommendations that we're going to be bringing forward to you today are really intended to make the system more inclusive. Our conversations have been many, and in some cases challenging and difficult over the last several years. I believe, though, that although we may differ on exactly how this work should be done, we are all working towards the same goal of making sure that Minneapolis is a city that benefits everyone. So what is 2020? What is Neighborhoods 2020? The service models for neighborhoods has largely remained unchanged for the past 30 years. We have changed programming and governance over the years, but the core structure has remained relatively constant. All the while, the city's goals, demographics, and residents have changed dramatically. Our city is more diverse, and renters now are a majority of our city's residents. We are also more aware of the disparities that affect our community, and through recent actions by the City Council, we have adopted the Strategic Racial Equity Action Plan, and other efforts are underway to really look at how we do our work differently. The Neighborhoods 2020 recommendations reflect a significant change in how the city will support our neighborhood systems for the next decade. The Neighborhoods 2020 recommendations maintains the existing neighborhood system while elevating the city's and the neighborhood's role to reach historically underengaged residents. The development of the framework has been the largest engagement undertaking by the NCR department since our creation. And just to give you an idea of that, we have had over 2,000 members of the public participate in this process to date through meetings, public comment periods, and visioning since 2007. And I just wanted to bring, this is a copy of all the comments that we have received over the last couple of years, amounting to about 1,400 pages when you put all the comments collectively together. That's not including the verbal conversations that we've had with many residents as well. So I wanted to just really stress, this conversation has been robust. We've heard from many voices, and there are many, many opinions about what we should be doing with our neighborhoods moving forward. So really I think we also need to touch base on what is kind of the core with neighborhood organizations. Our neighborhoods we have 84 neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods in the city of Minneapolis that have organized into 70 different organizations. They are well positioned to identify local needs and priorities, and their work has greatly benefited the city. Neighborhoods create a sense of place and give residents agency, working on such things as community gardens, community building activities, economic and affordable housing development. Over 700 volunteers come together monthly just to attend the board meetings to keep their organizations moving forward. We also have just recently completed the 2018 Neighborhood Program's Annual Report, which actually gives a really good summary of a lot of the good work that's going on around in the city. These are available both inside and outside of the chambers here for anybody who would like to take a closer look at that. In addition, the community and the city have invested heavily in the system. Over the past 27 years, we have invested over $300 million in supporting the neighborhood work in the city through a variety of different programs. Neighborhoods, in turn, have leveraged the power of residents to create a better city, with just in the last 3 years alone, leveraging over $8.6 million worth of volunteer time that have contributed to our community. Our neighborhood organizations, have had a considerable impact on making Minneapolis a better city. There's no question about that. But we also know that not everyone is fully engaged in this work. Having diverse representation at the board level where decisions affecting resource allocation, programming, and staffing decisions are made is also important. Diversity in leadership matters. Our biannual board diversity survey, which NCR just recently completed, our third cycle, shows significant underrepresentation in Black, Indigenous, and people of color renters as compared to the overall city. We know that some neighborhoods have done some excellent work in trying to address diverse representation, but overall, we have not seen any significant change in the last 4 years. As we move forward and look into the next decade, these are the critical areas we will need to address to ensure our neighborhood organizations remain vibrant and inclusive. I know that neighborhood organizations can take on this challenge, but we need to look at our programming, our funding, and our capacity support in order to support this effort. All throughout this process, the NCR department has kept equity at the core of our work. The department's equity focus really started in earnest in 2016 when the City Council adopted NCR's Blueprint for Equitable Engagement, furthering the city's goal of One Minneapolis. Our collective work to create a more equitable city did not stop there. Recently, the City Council adopted the 2040 plan, which states Minneapolis will have an equitable civic participation system that enfranchises everyone, recognizes the core and vital service neighborhood organizations provide to the city of Minneapolis, and builds people's long-term capacity to organize and improve their lives and neighborhoods. The work groups that helped form some of the original recommendations attended equity training, and all of the facilitators used throughout this process have expertise in equity. The department recognizes that equity is not something that can be achieved overnight, but is an ongoing process. The framework recommendations being presented today reflect a developmental approach of education, training, and incentivizing our neighborhoods to further build their work in an equity framework, while also looking at removing some of the barriers to participation. I think one of the goals that everyone can agree on is that neighborhood boards where decision power is being held at the very local level should reflect the diversity of their neighborhood. Now I'm going to go do a brief summary of the process that was used to lead us to today. We started this process in 2000, as I mentioned, in 2016 with the adoption of our Blueprint for Equitable Engagement document. But then also shortly after that, we started a process called what was called the Art of Hosting. The Art of Hosting actually basically pulled together community members from across the city in 5 community meetings where over 500 people attended. Throughout this process, the department had been intentional about also reaching other underengaged communities and making sure that their voice was included in the process. So we held 3 culturally specific focus groups. We held an online survey as well. And the Art of Hosting basically focused on 3 general questions. What are the services, opportunities, and information should neighborhood organizations provide? What are the characteristics of an effective neighborhood organization? And how can neighborhood organizations empower engagement? Through the Art of Hosting, these themes were generated, which were a little bit more at a higher level, but identified the importance of neighborhoods, the need for resources to do this work, the willingness and intention of neighborhoods to be good partners with the city, and also the need for having some help with being able to reach the equity and inclusion goals of the city. The NCEC has also been a partner in this work for a number of years. The NCEC created a subcommittee called the NCEC Neighborhoods 2020 Subcommittee, excuse me, and they identified these characteristics, which are on the screen, as core values to this work as well. They recognize the value of collaborating with community-based organizations, that equity and inclusion is an aspirational goal, and that keeping our place-based engagement system is important. Last spring, in May, about a year ago today, I presented to the City Council a summary of the work that had been completed to date, and really the need to dive further into 4 focus areas. One was program and funding, one was governance, another one was the citywide engagement policy, and the last one was really looking at the department itself, NCR's capacity to support any new programming that would be coming forward. The City Council established 3 work groups that were really intended to focus on recommendations in these particular areas. I wanted to just also highlight on each of these work groups, there was representation from the City Council. The mayor had representation as well. NCEC had 2 reps on each of the work groups. Policy Board had one on the second work group, which was around governance. Cultural community reps were included. Each work group also had 5 neighborhood representatives on it, as well as some equity and undoing racism representation as well. The first work group was focused on program funding and implementation, and you can see the list of names of the folks that participated in that. The second work group focused in on governance, which was looking at the current NCEC, Neighborhood Community Engagement Commission, as well as NRP Policy Board, and any other types of options about future governance of the program. And the third was focused on a citywide engagement policy, which is intended to actually help guide the city in developing and coordinating our engagement work, departmental level, and also interactions with neighborhood and the community overall. For 5 months, 46 members of these committees met to a total of almost, I think it was almost 30 times that they had meetings. So first of all, I just want to say a tremendous thank you for all the volunteers that committed their time and effort on those work groups to really do the work that they had put forward. Their recommendations significantly informed the framework, and I'll talk about that. There were some differences that came out of that. I do know through the public comment period that followed, some of the work group members expressed concern that their recommendations had changed or were disregarded. This is unfortunate, and it's not the outcome that we had intended. We try to be very clear as we engage the public about their role we use what's called the International Association of Public Participation Framework, about their role in the engagement process. In that, Casey, Carl, and myself both attended the orientation sessions to meet with the workgroup members to inform them about basically what their role was. And in this particular case, it was on a consult collaborative level where community members were going to give input into the city, but that the city actually had, it could be that we would change the recommendations that they would be bringing forward. This was further emphasized in the actual roles and expectations section of the information that they were giving, and I just wanted to read this because I think it's important. There may be times when your work group recommendations will not prevail or may be modified by the city. It is important to recognize that this is not a rejection of the integrity of your recommendation, but is an inevitable part of the process of municipal decision-making where a variety of views, perspectives, and recommendations are considered. So in that, we did promise that with the work groups that we were going to make their recommendations public, which we did in mid-December. We also held a number of community meetings to support and get input back about the work group recommendations. Those were in December of 2018. We held 5 of those, and again, we held 3 of them in different languages. Over 400 people attended those meetings alone to get more feedback around the recommendations that were coming forward. I do want to acknowledge that feeling that some of the work group members had about their recommendations not coming forward. It was not our intent, and we really, I think better messaging on that in the future would be good, but I just want to be clear about that. Okay, moving forward, with the actual framework itself, the department released our framework on February 28th for public comment. The department's recommendations were based on the work groups. I'm going to go, again, not entirely, and I'll go through and explain that a little bit. We did diverge considerably from what work group 2 had recommended, which was a larger kind of a multi-way for people to get appointed engagement commission. We did move away from that recommendation, but a lot of the other recommendations we did move forward. Prior to the release of our framework, we had established an internal review team of staff to help us develop our recommendations. This group consisted of the Division of Race and Equity, the I-Team, the City Attorney's Office, Arts, Culture, and Creative Economy, the City Coordinator's Office, Finance and Property Services, as well as our own staff. So now we get into the comment period. We opened the comment period for a total of 63 days, offered people multiple ways to comment. We wanted to try a couple things different this time, so we added text and voicemail as a way for people to comment on it, and we offered those in different languages as well. We held 5 community meetings that were sponsored by NCR. The department continued to do outreach to communities that had not typically participated or were underrepresented in neighborhood organizations, so 3 of these meetings were in different languages. We also attended 36 meetings held by community groups and neighborhood organizations. During the comment period, our staff connected with over 1,000 people, and we received over 300 what I call unique comments, which means an individual or an organization had put forward a comment. So when the comments came in, we also did a different process than what we normally would do. Instead of the department just looking at the comments, we had heard from a number of community members that they were concerned that somehow the city would filter these to whatever particular outcome we were looking for. So we tried something different. We actually did an internal review process where we hired Lisa Tabor, who is with Culture Brokers and had worked with the city on the Strategic Racial Equity Action Plan. We brought in a couple of NCEC reps. We brought in a representative from philanthropy, our own Division of Race and Equity, as well as some NCR staff to review those comments. What we heard from those comments were that diversity and leadership matters. Strong buy-in, and there is strong buy-in and support to the goals of inclusion and making sure that our boards and our communities are represented in neighborhood organizations. We also heard that the role of NCR and the city needs to be better defined, and that the capacity to support neighborhood organizations needs to be there. We also heard that we need to take a progressive approach to supporting boards to become more diverse and to get more inclusive. and that we had made a mistake on the governance structure and that we needed to rethink that piece as well. And again, I'll go through that as we go through the actual recommendations. So getting to the framework itself. So this is the build up to the framework. So framework itself. So what the framework is the general parameters for the program. What it is not is the actual program guidelines. This is a general agreement around where we want this to go. Guidelines still need to be developed. The details of actually working out some of the changes that we're proposing still need to be developed. Our vision for this work is that Neighborhoods 2020 vision is to have an inclusive community where all people are valued, all communities are engaged, and leadership mirrors the diversity of our city. The goals include accountability, transparency, consistency, make it understandable, equitable, collaborative, and a source of pride and belonging for communities. Many of our recommendations that are in the framework are intended to simplify the existing neighborhood system. We believe the complexity is disengaging and limits the ability for all residents to fully participate. Complexity can lead to power and knowledge imbalances, which can limit a resident's ability and desire to participate. Simplifying this work will also includes the work that we at the city are doing and how we actually manage and support these programs. We believe increasing simplicity can be done while supporting neighborhood autonomy, a key and valuable aspect to our existing neighborhood system. Program purposes that are included in the document remain the same as what's currently in the community participation program. I think we didn't hear a whole lot of feedback on that, and they seem to be really consistent with what we're looking to accomplish with our neighborhood groups. Having neighborhoods identify and act on local priorities, be able to address things in their immediate area as they see fit. Influencing city decisions and helping the council to be more informed about the process, and also having the community weigh in on city decisions as they're being made, and then also increasing involvement on the local level. So changes in the document. NCR Supportive Services. We are a lot clearer in here about our supportive services, and that neighborhoods asked us to be clear about what we're going to do. We agree that this is important for neighborhoods. We're as tied to neighborhood success as the neighborhoods they are themselves. We talked to the staff in the arts and creative economy, the arts and creative city making, and looking at getting their support and being able to build training for neighborhood organizations around use of arts and artists in their work, as well as we've had conversations with the Division of Race and Equity about adding trainings around undoing racism, understanding trauma, white supremacy, and those kind of things, and how that can affect engagement in their operations. And those have been added to the document. We also heard, and we had planned on doing this, but we also heard very clearly looking at an internal review of the department itself. This is a new program with very significant changes to it, and as a result, we need to look at the department about how we basically align our staff to support this work. We still have a lot of citywide, we still have a lot of enterprise engagement needs as well, and really having some outside support to come in and look at our department about what's the best way to deliver these services. As I mentioned, there's a number of changes in here that really get around simplifying the process, to increase access. So the framework proposes to establish new minimum performance standards for neighborhood organizations, covering everything from the group's bylaws and financial accounting to their outreach efforts, and using best practices as a guide. Minimum bylaw requirements will follow accepted best practices, such as those determined by the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, while still allowing neighborhoods to create their own unique identities above these minimum standards. I just want to be really clear about this. This is a set of base about how neighborhoods, the bylaw standards, but neighborhoods can still build upon that. We're also looking at simplifying board elections so that all residents of the city can understand the process. Right now we have 70 different neighborhood organizations that have many different ways that people get elected to the boards. We are also looking at establishing board term limits to provide access for new leaders while balancing the need to retain institutional memory. One of the things that's not in the document, but we did hear from the public, and I just want to assure people we haven't lost this at all, is that if a board goes through a standard election process and is unable to fill a seat, that there would be a way to have an exemption to allow an existing board member to be able to be retained on that organization. If they're not able to fill it through a regular election process. We also have the notion in here, Neighborhood Day, which has been somewhat a topic of a discussion as well. And this is the idea of having one day a year where all the elections occur for all neighborhoods. The goal of having one day a year when all 70 neighborhoods host their elections is to create simplicity across the city for all residents to get involved locally. In addition, one election day allows NCR, the department, as well as other city departments to support the citywide effort. We've talked to communications department, we've talked to the city clerk's office as well in elections about how we as a city can partner with neighborhoods to really kind of elevate this day so all residents in the city are aware that what neighborhoods are and what they're doing on and how to get involved on the board level. So in that, with 70 different neighborhood organizations, each with differing processes around elections and nominations, it's a real barrier for underrepresented communities which are not geographically organized to participate. The notion of having Neighborhood Day combined with the uniform election processes would be a huge step forward in making it easier for underrepresented communities as well as residents to participate. In funding, we're recommending that 75% of the program total go to neighborhood organizations and that 25% go to community-based organizations. As been the theme throughout the engagement process on developing this program, there needs to be a role for community-based organizations. Many of these groups specialize in connecting with the very underrepresented communities which we are trying to reach. Furthermore, trust needs to be established in order to build further connections and partnerships. Funding these groups will be critical to support our equity work, and we are proposing that the funding for community-based organizations be used for two purposes. One is to be building leadership that connects with either the city or neighborhood organizations directly, and the second one is increasing engagement within their own communities. Within the neighborhood organizations themselves, the 75% that would go to neighborhood organizations, we heard loud and clear not to do we had the 18-month deadline in there about reaching board diversity, and we took that out. We took that out because people were asking and wanting, and it made a lot of sense, to actually do a more progressive approach to supporting neighborhoods to build year-over-year progress to attain more board diversity. So we dropped the 18-month piece, as I mentioned, and now we're looking at using funding as an incentivizing a way to reach that diversity. The first set of this is 50% allocation is the base funding. So that's basically neighborhood organizations that make these changes in that adopt basically the requirements of the program would get 50% of their allocation right off the bat, and that would include they would have a diversity action plan, basically, which is similar to what they do now about how they're reaching and engaging with underengaged communities. 25% would be on top of that, which would be around the notion of any work that they're doing in order to really connect those intentional work doing around reaching those underrepresented communities. So knowing that it will take additional efforts, neighborhoods identify what that is, and they get that money on top of the base money. Year-over-year activity, we would allocate that on an annual basis, and as long as they're making progress and getting that work done and those activities being completed, that money would continue into the future. And then the final piece is 25% of the allocation would be used for supporting specific projects and programs, which are basically the activities that the neighborhood is doing on a regular basis.
Mr. Rubidor, I'm going to pause you there. I have a question or comment from Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham, and thank you, Mr. Rubidor. I'm just going back a little bit to slide number 30, NCR Internal Review, and curious, who do you have in mind to do that review? Would it be a self-review? Is there an outside organization or group that you're considering?
Chair Cunningham and Council Vice President Jenkins, we haven't determined who that would be yet. It would have to be, to me, it has to be an outside third party to come in and really kind of, I mean, we're too close to the work. It would make more sense to bring somebody in that has more like an organizational expertise, where we could lay out what we're trying to accomplish, what are our demands around supporting the city enterprise work, what are our existing staffing structure and helping us to think through a better way to kind of align that work. So to me, that would be an outside party coming in to help.
Okay, thank you.
All right, back to you.
Right. I'm almost done. Governance. I want to talk about governance. We had originally in the first framework recommended kind of a really simple a community engagement commission kind of role. What we heard loud and clear from the public and the neighborhood organizations specifically was the need to have direct representation on an advisory board to the city council around the neighborhood work. We are recommending in this revised framework of elevating the existing NRP policy board by adding neighborhood representatives directly chosen by neighborhoods. The city has made a major investment, as I mentioned before, in our neighborhood organizations, and having an advisory board overseeing this work specifically, we consider to be vital. So currently the NCEC and the NRP policy board both work on neighborhoods, and what we're recommending is that all of the neighborhood work for the NRP program, whatever remains of the community participation program, and whatever the future program is called, would all rest within the NRP policy board. We would also recommend that the election process or the selection process of the neighborhood representatives for that board be really simple and easy for people to understand. Again, a theme of a lot of this work is to really simplify the system so everybody can understand how it works. So that's our recommendation on the policy board. We also do still see a need for a community engagement commission that would oversee the city's other engagement work as well. This group would work with the NRP policy board because obviously neighborhoods have a significant role in that. But the city does a lot of other work around different policy developments, different initiatives that are out there. So as I mentioned, and I'll talk about in a second, is we're looking at putting together a citywide engagement policy. This group will really oversee that, really elevating the International Association of Public Participation principles within the city work directly with departments around putting together engagement plans. So really kind of having those two specific roles. And the last topic I want to talk about is the citywide engagement policy. And I know the chair also has some additional comments on this coming up. But I wanted to talk about this. I know one thing I want to acknowledge, in the original document that went out, we really understated the value of Work Group 3. We believe that the work that Work Group 3 which was around the citywide engagement policy, was really great work, and it was our intent simply to carry that forward. That didn't come off that well in the actual document, and we have since clarified that in the revised version, as we heard back from people, to really clarify that this is really important work, and that the work that Work Group 3 was a good foundation to move forward. I'm happy to say Work Group 3 has agreed to reconvene, and we'll be carrying this work forward. In fact, they're meeting tomorrow, so that work is starting right away. As well as we have convened a citywide internal staff team that would be working on this as well. That citywide internal team includes representation from every city department. So we have everybody on board. So that will be moving forward. It's our goal to have by this time next year, to have a citywide engagement policy before you for your consideration. Moving forward, there's a number of steps in here, and actually there's more detail that's laid out in the actual resolution that is before you today. But basically, we're looking for moving this work forward today with the notion of beginning to develop the actual program guidelines, which is the next body of work. We'll be working with the community and neighborhoods around that as well, with the idea of reporting back by November 4th around the actual guidelines. We would also be looking at bringing back to you by August 26th a restructured NRP policy board, a new community engagement commission, and then discussions about how we would basically dismantle the current NCEC and transition into these two new bodies. In that time period, also the department will do the internal review, and that will be brought back at the same time that we bring back the guidelines to the city, to the Peace Committee. So with that concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you, Mr. Rubador. Before opening the public comments, I will look to my colleagues to see if there are any questions or comments based on the presentation. All right, not seeing any. I will then thank you so much, Mr. Rubador. Before opening it up, I also just want to give a shout out to everybody for being here today. Thank you so much. This is in the middle of the day, so thank you for taking your time to be here today to participate in this work. As we have folks coming up to testify, I ask for you to please direct your comments to me. There might be folks in the room that you feel frustration with, but I ask for you to direct your comments to me and not anybody else. Can we agree to that? Thank you, folks. Just want to make sure we get it. See? Community participation, right? And also, I just want to preemptively apologize if I butcher your name. All right. So, I need to make a motion to open, right? Or I don't even, okay. All right, so I hereby open the public hearing. Where can folks sign up if they have not signed up yet? If you have not signed up yet,
Chair Cunningham, there's still a sign-up list out in the hall.
so if you feel inspired as listening to folks and would like to make your voice heard as well, there is a sign-up sheet out in the hallway. And with that, we'll go ahead and dive in. First up, we have John Carey, followed by Jeff Strand and Nick, Chikowitz. Sorry, I see it all the time, but never had to say it out loud. All right, the floor is yours. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is John Carey. I live at 169 Malcolm Avenue Southeast, Minneapolis. I have been a resident of Minneapolis since 1970, and I have been a member of my neighborhood association's board on and off since the 1970s. During that time, the city has changed dramatically. Our neighborhood has also, but the complexion and composition of the neighborhood board has not. And the types of recommendations, tools, and incentives that are contained in this recommendation, I strongly support, because it will give us the necessary ways to include people who have traditionally not been active in our neighborhood. And that would be students from the university, people of color, and renters. At this point in time in our nation's history, we need an active citizenry, and we need places where people can practice democracy and listening to one another and solving problems together. And I think this proposal helps us move in that direction, and I strongly support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. Up next, we have Jeffrey Strand, followed by Nick Chevowitz, and then Janet Hort. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Jeffrey Strand, 5100 Thomas Avenue North, Minneapolis, Ward 4. Thank you to the Peace Committee and Chair Cunningham for the opportunity to address the committee, and thank you for your openness to consider potential changes in the process. I'm speaking today to join with the voices of many other Minneapolis residents and strong supporters of the great work of neighborhood organizations in our city to express concerns about content and process for the latest and prior iterations of the NCR Department's Neighborhood 2020 framework. I speak from the perspective of someone who was elected to the original NRP Policy Board, who was the first non-elected official of the reconstituted Policy Board, and also a founding member of the NCEC after the Community Engagement Task Force that recommended it. I also served on the Work Group 2 and serve on the NCEC currently. Those groups both submitted written comments and recommendations concerning funding guidelines, governance, citywide engagement. For the record, the NCEC began the forward-thinking work on Neighborhoods 20 in March, April 2015, with the foresight and intention to complete multiple tasks in its work plan. Throughout this process, what I've observed is that the funnel has narrowed. So going from the heart of hosting with 842 comments, 600 participants, we suddenly were in the midst of the roadmap and then a work group of 49 residents. And then we went to the comment review group that had 2 residents, 3 staff, a paid consultant, and undefined number of city staff. So I support the program purposes, but you can't dress up a flawed proposal. I cannot support the recommendations that will have a 25% cut in neighborhood organizations. I would call for increased funding to both neighborhoods and community cultural-based groups. I'm calling for the city council and mayor to support a transformative process, but ask for a short delay, not to exceed 6 months, with a independent, fair, and impartial third party, such as University of Minnesota Kira, to complete this process in a way consistent with the IAP2 principles that the city council has adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strand. Up next is Nick Chebowitz. Then we have Janet Court, followed by Kim Forbes.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham and committee members. I am the current chair of the Minneapolis Neighborhood Community Engagement Commission, and Commissioner Strand laid out the overall history, which was also part of what I wanted to say, so I'm going to feed off of kind of what Commissioner Strand shared. The NCEC has spent, since 2015, many hours working on this specific topic. We've brought in individuals from across the country through Skype to talk to individuals in Seattle. We've talked to individuals at that faraway place called St. Paul, Minnesota, to learn about how they handle neighborhoods so that we could put together a process and a recommendation that made sense. The NCEC supports the statements of the Northside Neighborhoods Council and call for a short delay. I know that there'll be an update today on what happens next. I've seen a staff directive. Based upon the NCEC's recommendations for a delay, for a deeper dive into funding questions, the staff directive seems to fit with where our recommendation comes from. All of you have had a chance to see that directly, whether you're on the Peace Committee or the overall City Council has seen the work of the NCEC. The NCEC is looking for support for a multi-year funding structure that allows neighborhoods to complete their work and not have to worry year to year. I've had some individuals in my neighborhood, I currently live in the Bryn Mawr neighborhood, ask, why do we want to delay? What new ideas will come forward? What new ideas will come out? I think my answer back to that is that there may be some new ideas, but the number one reason that the NCEC and myself support the delay is to rebuild trust with communities that feel there is no trust currently between whether it's the City Council, whether it's NCR, NCEC, and so really building kind of that team approach to this would be the number one reason for the delay. We ask for 6 months because we think that makes sense and there'll be an opportunity to dive in and really redo this work and build upon the work. We don't want to start over again. What we would like is a delay so that the parties who feel like they haven't been heard, and that also includes individuals who think neighborhoods need a lot of work. I've said since my time on the NCEC that those that find barriers to neighborhoods also need to be part of this process. Thank you again for allowing us to speak today.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Janet Court, followed by Kim Forbes and Coriner Butler. All right, the floor is yours.
Hello, my name is Janet Court, and I live at 1216 Powderhorn Terrace. I'm a member of the PPNA Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Organization. I want to thank Chairman Cunningham and the Peace Committee for having us here and letting us speak. I was on work group 2, and we spent 6 months. We also spent some time before that in terms of the larger groups that met and gave feedback before we got as far as the work groups. So there's been a lot of work done, and there's been obviously a lot of information here. However, and actually it's getting better, but it still needs more work to be where it ought to be, to have something that's really sustainable and robust for the city. We agree basically with the principles. We started out really working for transparency and equity and inclusion, and those are things that we really, really want to see happen. And we want to see them happen in a way that's sustainable for the city. So we feel that there's a need to kind of just step back a little bit and really think that an outside group like Cura could be a really big help in terms of bringing the vision here that we have, a very, very great vision to reality. So I want to thank you again for your receptivity to the voice of the community, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ms. Court. Next up, we have Kim F., Coroner B., and then Richard Gilliard.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Kim Forbes. I'm the board president of Elliott Park Neighborhood. I've had the privilege to volunteer with the Elliott Park Neighborhood for almost 20 years now. During those years, I've seen the organization transition from a community development corporation to a community engagement organization as funding and priorities from the city have changed. Today, we are focused on building community vitality by empowering and connecting neighbors to take action on issues that matter most. Our organization is beginning another transition as we move away from NRP funding towards operating on CPP funds. I am confident that our passionate and dedicated community leaders can figure out this next phase of our organization. However, we need support in finding a way to transition from an organization reliant on city funding to a sustainably built nonprofit with diversified funding. We need support to continue employing top-notch staff that can be fundraisers, managers, organizers, and administrators. The Neighborhoods 2020 document does not provide that needed support. Instead, it outlines a framework that regulates neighborhood work without truly understanding what we need in order to be successful. If we continue to fund our neighborhoods poorly while increasing expectations at the same time, we are setting neighborhoods up for failure. Together with the entire EP&I boards, the Northside Neighborhood Council, and others, I ask that you delay consideration of the Neighborhoods 2020 document in order to address the gaps in expectations and communications between the city and neighborhood organizations, and then collectively develop a plan that will set neighborhoods up for success. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Coroner B., Richard G., and then Richard Adams. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name.
You are gutting my name.
In all fairness, your handwriting is pretty, but hard to read.
It's Karina Bowler.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Hello, council members. My name is Karina Bowler, and I've lived in Elliott Park neighborhood since 1997. I first contacted my neighborhood association with my neighbors, and we become troubled by what's happening in our neighborhood. We have issues from repairs, pest poor management, and I reached out to our EP&I neighborhood, and they were very helpful, and they jumped right in. They have supported our tenants association in dumping repairs, negotiating with our rehabilitation of our building, and building community. They have helped us through our meetings, building owners with our ownership. They have provided us with backpacks, school supplies for 52 kids in our building. Neighborhood associations do really great work with our community, and they need to be funded. They need to be funded. I don't want to go on too much, but I think neighborhood associations do a lot of work, and I see it do it. I see the work. I see the work that goes into it, and it's a lot of great people in this room, and neighborhood associations need to be funded. Hashtag. So I don't want to hold up one more time, but neighborhood associations, listen, need to be funded, okay? .com, .org, all that.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Richard Gilliard, Richard Adams, followed by Jean D.
We have a slight mix-up of the Richards. My name is Vince Netz. Richard and I have swapped with the permission of the clerk. Good afternoon. My name is Vince Netz. I'm the immediate past president of Prospect Park Association, 2828 University Avenue Southeast, and I'm also representing my three predecessors. Christina Larson, Dick Popley, and Steve Banks. We served during the most recent 15 years of historic change in our community, including construction of Bank Stadium, light rail, and the 2040 Comprehensive Plan. Based on our long experience, we strongly support the Neighborhoods 2020 recommendations. I draw your attention to our letter, which provides some specifics. Minneapolis neighborhoods are vibrant, complex, and rapidly changing. The organizations officially designated to represent them must also change. Since most are small, fragile nonprofits almost entirely dependent on volunteers, they need your help, and help starts at the top. With few exceptions, my neighborhood organization board is entirely dominated by long-term homeowners. This may have made sense 30 years ago, it doesn't anymore. Our neighborhood is 9,000 residents, 80% people, 80% renters, 30% people of color. The degree to which neighborhood organizations function essentially as homeowners associations is the degree to which they fail to serve the community. It also sends a strong insider exclusionary message, no matter how thoughtful or well-intended volunteers may be. So to illustrate this, I have a map of my neighborhood. And the dots are the board. This is the redlining map of 1935, made prominent in the PBS special about Jim Crow of the North. And these are the two overlaid. With one exception, this is what privilege looks like. And it's very hard to change. We've spent many hundreds of hours trying to change it. When you hear calls for delay or limits to 2020, you are hearing a call to this status quo. 2020 is the right mix of incentives, oversight, and most importantly, intentionality to help ensure a vibrant future for our neighborhoods, and we strongly encourage you to vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And to clarify,
I'm sorry. Prospect Park.
You traded with somebody though?
Richard Gilliards.
So
I'm Vince.
got it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So next up then we have Richard Adams. Okay, sorry, we had two Richards in a row, so it's kind of, okay. So we have Richard Adams, followed by Jean D. and Beverly C. Thank you.
Chair Cunningham, council members, thank you so much for taking my input here today and being available for this feedback. Not much I can add to what's been said before. I strongly support the Neighborhoods 2020 proposal for reasons outlined I've been in the neighborhood. I've been a homeowner in Prospect Park for 35 years. I've been very actively involved in the neighborhood group for about 20 years. During this time, I've seen virtually no change in the makeup of the board and the people who make the decisions. The neighborhood, when I started, was justifiably the historic core of the neighborhood, and even though the neighborhood itself has changed dramatically over the past 15 years, the mentality that the neighborhood remains the historic core has not changed at all. I too caution you about calls for delay. I have been listening to debates about inclusion for the entire time that I've been involved. And at some point, debate becomes the enemy of the action. And I think that the proposal here that has been presented addresses it's a solid framework from which to operate going forward. It can be revised and tweaked in the future. But I echo what Vince says. A call for delay is a call for the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Next up, we have Jean D., followed by Beverly C., and then Richard G., I think is how we flip that around. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. My name is Jean DeMarais, and I'm a 20-year resident and homeowner of Minneapolis in the Howe neighborhood. I'm also a board member on Longfellow Community Council. Started my second term, and I'm a constituent. I learned of the 2020 plan along with everyone else when it was released, not before. No one came out to talk to LCC staff and the board. I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years, and for most of the time I've heard how Longfellow LCC is the gold standard of neighborhoods. But no one came out to ask us how it's done. No one asked our brilliant executive director with a 13-year tenure how she does this so well. No one. At the meeting we had with the community, in which both council members Gordon and Johnson were present, as well as Mr. Rubador said, "You're Longfellow, you have nothing to worry about." Yes, we all do. All that And at that well-attended meeting, only one person stood in support of this plan. The rest of the crowd loudly and strongly opposed. Aside from objections on key issues, the loudest objections were to the haste. Secondly was funding. Multiple community members asked for delays to give the neighborhoods time to collaborate with the city, and in particular NCR. When the question of funding came up, we learned that this wasn't considered in this plan. Funding. After that meeting, it was determined by Andrew that the funding source was not identified but would be later in later drafts. It has not been mentioned yet. What we did learn is that TIF district will not expire until December 31st of 2020. So dedicated funding from this source will continue until fiscal year 2021. Why is NCR rushing this? Allow the neighborhoods time to work at this. At this point, there's little confidence in NCR. Allow a third party to step in and help, and allow us adequate time. And look to those neighborhoods that are successful. Surely LCC is not the only one. Why wipe the slate clean when you know there are successful neighborhood organizations out there? Instead of destruction, perhaps study success. Thank you for considering delay.
Thank you. Next up, we have Beverly C., followed by Richard G., and with Karen P. on deck. Sorry, it's hard to read. You're up.
Good afternoon. My name is Beverly Connerton, and I also live in the Longfellow neighborhood. I've lived there for 20 years. I've just been elected to the LCC board. It's not my first go-round. I was on the LCC board for about 5 years during the active implementation of the NRP program. I was also a representative for 2 years on the NRP policy board when neighborhood representation on that board was built into the structure. These experiences have provided a valuable opportunity to see neighborhood organizations and the value that neighborhood organizations bring to residents of the neighborhood and to the city as a whole. Minneapolis really does have a unique and long-standing community organization system that's really designed to address problems and issues that are unique to each neighborhood and reflect the differences in the neighborhoods. We really are the envy of other parts of the country who do not have this unique organizational system, neighborhood organization system, that provides such a value to citizens and a value overall to the city. We are, however, at a critical time at this juncture, moving from an NRP framework that is well-funded to a different framework and a different funding structure for citizen engagement into the future. It's important that we get it right and not rush to major change without neighborhood organizations having a full involvement to help develop the framework that they will be implementing. The framework as drafted now is way too prescriptive. It doesn't reflect the uniqueness of neighborhoods and the ability and experience that neighborhoods have brought to community organizing in this city. And it lacks an organized input from neighborhood organizations. The framework has very little discussion of funding, and others have said this as well. We are asking that you delay adoption of the framework to allow discussion of how the framework can be revised so that both the city and the neighborhood organizations can go forward to create a strong and supported framework for the future. If we are replacing NRP, it should be a system that is supportive and effective. We ask that, I'm going to take just a half a minute more. We ask that
make
you
sure that we're fair to everybody else.
bring in a consultant to help that process to make it more effective, and that the neighborhood organizations needs to be involved in this, not just limited to those who are involved in prior work group discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have, am I right that you're Richard G.?
I'm Richard Gilliard.
Yes.
People
G for
often
short.
confuse Vince and I.
Then followed up by Karen Peterson, and then with Dan C. on deck.
Thank you for this opportunity to comment. I'm Richard Gilliard. I live at 194 Malcolm in Prospect Park. I'm a longtime resident of Minneapolis, a lifetime resident of Minneapolis, and a longtime neighborhood activist. And I strongly support the Neighborhoods 2020 recommendations. Since 2007, I've been involved with the University District Alliance, a partnership formed by the Minnesota legislature to address planning and development problems unique to the university neighborhoods. I've been a board member of Prospect Park Association. I've served as its master plan chair and its vision and planning committee chair. And I'm a founding member of the Towerside Innovation District. It's through this experience that I am keenly aware that our city's current neighborhood system is not structured to fully reflect the composition, ideas, and needs of our rapidly changing community. As the city's population and richness and diversity grows, it is essential that the community engagement system be one that is people-focused and reflect the composition and ideas of our rapidly changing community. To enrich the city, its residents, and its residents' quality of life, I support the Neighborhoods 2020 vision, particularly those recommendations which, in addition to calling for uniform organizational structures, include recognition of the arts, culture, and creative economy organizations and individuals as an essential and overarching citywide community, funding for CBOs that connect diverse city residents to city-identified priorities and engage specific audiences that transcend neighborhood boundaries, and availability of pooled resources, training, and technical assistance, and resources that facilitate the collaboration between neighborhoods and community organizations. I urge the timely adoption of Neighborhoods 2020 and look forward to participating in the exciting restructured framework that they call for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Karen P., followed by Dan C., and then Dan Bryant.
Good afternoon. My name is Karen Peterson. It's quite all right. I live at 215 Broadway Street Northeast. And I wanted to start by saying I serve on the Sheridan Neighborhood Board. I regularly attend St. Anthony West Neighborhood Organization meetings. I'm on the Broadway Street Task Force. I also happen to have served on Work Group 3, which I should say I serve on Work Group 3. And I'm also a renter, and a renter with deep concerns about the process and the product that we have here before us. I want to thank you, Chair Cunningham, for taking the time, and the council members for listening to us. I'd like to start just by reading a little brief thing from the framework. It says, city decision-making is improved when we involve those affected by these decisions. Through partnering with neighborhood organizations, the city of Minneapolis can better reach and be informed by the people who are affected by these decisions. And then the framework turns around and strip away all the power sharing and the coordination between them. I'll start by saying that in the comment period, a lot of people commented that we need more neighborhood specialists. To have one person trying to coordinate for 14 plus neighborhoods is simply asking too much of one person and really impacts that ability to provide services that you need. At the same time, I want to give a shout out to our neighborhood specialist who happens to be a rock star, Stacy Sorensen. I don't know how she does what she does. I honestly do not. But when the recommendation was for neighborhood specialists, but what's being proposed instead, they're going to hire more people in the legal department. Further on the NCEC, the first thing that this process does is strip the N out. So you're taking the neighborhood out of the CEC, and instead of neighborhoods bringing forth their own appointees, everything will be appointed by the city. So again, the neighborhood is stripped out of the process. And then with this work group coming up, why are people currently involved in neighborhood organizations not allowed to participate in something that is by, for, and about neighborhoods? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We've got now Dan C., followed by Dan B., and then Elizabeth B. Thank you so much.
Chair Cunningham and council members, my name is Dan Collison, a renter that lives in Ward 13, and the executive director for the Easttown Business Partnership at 810 South 7th Street, and senior pastor of First Covenant Church in Elliott Park at the same address. Speaking as a pastor for 10 years in Elliott Park first,
The staff leadership of EP&I have been critically important for the advancement of consistent community engagement and community good in our neighborhood. When I arrived in 2009, the church building was empty most days of the week and almost bankrupt. Today, First Covenant's an inclusive and sustainable religious community that provides space for nine nonprofits, including a year-round nightly homeless shelter for 50 to 60 mostly single adult women, an early childhood center, free legal aid clinic, arts co-op, and a $42 million, 169-unit tax credit affordable housing project. None of those partnerships or innovative programs could have been effectively brokered without the informed and professionally organized help of the EP&I staff, board, and their consistent programming that engages residents in the neighborhood. Speaking as the executive director for the Easttown Business Partnership, our organization is celebrating its 40th year of service to the community, has nearly 80 member companies with reach to close to 400 companies representing nearly 20,000 employees in the Elliott Park and downtown East neighborhoods. And as a business association, we share EP&I and DM&A's concerns that the current plan does not adequately address the proposed shift away from a city-driven oversight system for neighborhood initiatives to be more tightly controlled set of neighborhood imperatives. So we are not in support of the current proposal. We would support a delay and a more thoughtful process. We acknowledge organizations need to be efficiently monitored and become more inclusive and driven by the goals that benefit us all as a city. And we believe that neighborhoods are the lifeblood of the city, but the plan as it exists today does not achieve that, but we'll get there. We believe it'll get there with some time. We commend you for putting forward a vision, and we ask that you take the time to play that vision out with more feedback and a structure that doesn't defund our associations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I believe we have Don Bryant. Is that right?
Dan Bryant.
Dan.
My name is Dan Bryant. I am a renter at 2000 Sharon Avenue Southeast. I strongly support the plan before you today. The purpose of neighborhood associations is to represent all the residents that live within their boundaries. This is not happening in many neighborhood associations across the city. I live in a neighborhood which has an overwhelming majority of students and renters, and yet less than a quarter of the seats on the board are held by members of those groups. I've been to numerous board elections and I've consistently found the demographics of those present in stark contrast to the demographics of the neighborhood. My impression talking with people from across the city is that this is not unique to my neighborhood. The recommendations for you today will not be capable of solving all the issues that are faced by neighborhood associations. We'll make strides to help address them. In particular, I support having a diversity action plan be a requirement for funding, additional city support for engagement activities directed towards underrepresented communities, minimum bylaw requirements, citywide election days, and dedicated funding for community organizations. I hope you support this plan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We turn the chair to Chair Cunningham. Elizabeth is next.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gordon. Next up, we have Elizabeth, followed by, oh no, I'm going to say Marley Anderson. I apologize if that's not correct. Followed by Vanessa H.
Hello. My name is Elizabeth Brophy. I've been a board member for the Nokomis East Neighborhood Association, or NENA, for a little over 2 years now. In my experience, neighborhood associations perform many valuable services for the neighborhoods they represent. But I think the most important thing about neighborhood associations is their ability to identify issues in their community and quickly move to address them in ways that would be impractical or outright infeasible for the city. I have a couple of examples of this boots-on-the-ground advantage and the tangible benefits it's had on people's lives. First, in 2017, ICE raids were happening all over the city, including in Nokomis East. The fear and uncertainty that affected many people in my neighborhood. In a matter of days, NENA was able to put together a community meeting with an immigration lawyer and other community organizers. We made sure that all those with concerns fully knew their rights and helped them make action plans to help lessen the strain their families were feeling. This was only possible because of all the work that the staff at NENA had already put in, building trust within the community and through outreach and advocacy. In 2018, community members told NENA that getting access to affordably priced fresh produce and other healthy foods was a constant struggle in the area. We looked into the issue and possible solutions, and in short order arranged to bring the Metro Mobile Market in twice a month. While it doesn't fully address the ongoing issue, it was able to quickly provide some relief for members of my community facing this problem and make an improvement in their quality of life. This work was recently recognized by the city, and our staff was honored by being named one of 2019's Health Heroes. These are just two instances of the many, many ways neighborhood associations are able to serve your constituents and build a Minneapolis people want to live in. I hope you will vote to continue supporting this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up,
Marlis.
what is it?
Marlis.
Marlis, sort of close. Followed by Vanessa H. and Robin L.
Good afternoon. My name is Marlis Anderson, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. I would like to discuss the importance of our neighborhood organization, Elliott Park Neighborhood, Inc., EPNI. For the past 7.5 years, my rental apartment has been in the Elliott Park neighborhood. I became involved with EPNI after my attempts to work with the city to address two major problems in our community, very dangerous streets and the need for updates at our extremely active neighborhood park were unsuccessful. Trying to navigate city departments resulted in little or no action being taken. I needed another avenue to address these issues. With the incredible support and many hours of hard work by Elliott Park Neighborhood, Inc., including Executive Director Vanessa Haig and Committee Organizer Jordan Monroe, a plan of action was developed. Our organization efforts were resulted in obtaining the attention of both the city and the park board, and we are now seeing action on addressing two serious neighborhood concerns. Neighborhood organizations are able to support their residents and address issues in the ways the city cannot. Neighborhoods empower the community to take action without being burdened by layers of bureaucracy. We still have many challenges, issues, and projects we'd like to work on. The need is great, but with dwindling city funds affecting what we can do, we have to choose a small portion of the project we're able to work on. What I see now with this framework is more control and regulation by the city, which will add more bureaucracy and layers to navigate through, which will greatly restrict the activities of the community. Instead of applauding neighborhood organizations and the thousands of hours of volunteer time, the city is dismissing them in their efforts. I stand with EPNI and support the request and a delay on this framework. The residents of Minneapolis need the city to do better in supporting our unique and impacting neighborhood system. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Next up is Vanessa H., followed by Robin L., and then with David M. on deck.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham and council members, for the opportunity to address you today. My name is Vanessa Haight, and I'm resident of the Minnehaha neighborhood and Executive Director of Elliott Park Neighborhood, Inc. I am also a participant of Work Group 3, the Citywide Community Engagement Policy. This is an incredibly important moment in the history of Minneapolis neighborhood organizations. We have the opportunity to be innovative and develop a framework that truly supports our neighborhoods in being more inclusive, vibrant, and effective. Neighborhood organizations are doing great work that the city has no capacity or ability to do. For example, neighborhood organizations are leading grassroots initiatives in economic development, in tenant rights, in access to healthy food, and more. What we need is support to do this work, not increased regulation and oversight. There are already several tools in place to hold neighborhoods accountable, but they are not being utilized. We all want to do better in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion. The city has work to do on these values, and so do neighborhoods. What we need is more support, more financial capacity to do community organizing, and more support to address institutional barriers that benefit white homeowners over underrepresented communities. Instead of recognizing this work and trying to better understand how to support neighborhoods in meeting goals around accountability, transparency, and equity, we are looking at a framework that will make it harder for neighborhoods to be effective. Overall, more resources will be spent on administrative time at both neighborhoods and at the city, and less time will be available for working with the community. I also want to mention my disappointment in the community engagement process around Neighborhoods 2020. I have spent so many hours following the different iterations of engagement and on Work Group 3, only to feel like that work was tossed aside for a predetermined plan. The latest version of this framework was released only days before this public hearing, with no time for the community to review it. I ask that you delay this framework and provide an opportunity for a trusted third party, such as Cura, to bring the community together to develop an innovative framework that supports neighborhoods in becoming more inclusive, vibrant, and effective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, out of Ward 4, we got Robin L., followed by David M., and then Dennis F.
Right? Committee Chair Cunningham, my name is Robin Lewis. I am the chair of Weber Camden Neighborhood, so I'm here to represent. With that, I want to tell you that our organization is rebuilding right now. We're going through a transition. I have been as chair since October, so there's been a lot of things that went on prior, and there's things that we want to do as a community. And as a person who's lived in this community for over a year, I wanted to get involved, and I did. I've lived in Minneapolis all my life. I know how important these organizations are, and I want to see my community in particular. I want to see the children and youth be represented. I want to see our seniors represented. And right now, even though I may not have all the statistics and things that are going on, I know that funding is very important. And having the right funding for me to do the work that I truly want to do with the people in our community. There is a need, and I'm here to represent to say that I ask for delay because there is much concern from surrounding neighborhoods that it's worth taking another look and allow Cura to facilitate a new process.
Thank you, Ms. Robin. Next up, we have David M., followed by Dennis F., and then Corwin M.
Good afternoon. I'm David Mosman. I speak to you wearing two hats, hopefully. First, I represent Marcy Homes Neighborhood Association, and then I'll speak with some personal comments as well. Marcy Homes submitted comments on the prior version. The revised version came out in not a timely manner to this hearing. We have not had time to review them in detail. We thus wish for you to delay action on this thing until we can review it and submit our comments. Neighborhood associations are about creating neighborhoods and community. Community requires relationships. Relationships require time. This process of 2020, this threat to our survival and our economic viability, brings us together to understand and share. We need the time to look at it, to review it, and to share and build our own community within the board and within the greater community. Now, as a member of the community, I am a little odd. I used to drive. I no longer drive. As I go around, I live in Marcy Homes because of the mass transit. I've lived there for almost 10 years now. And as I ride the mass transit, I realize that the parking issue is not the primary issue. The issue is that we don't see each other. We don't use the mass transit. The people on the bus are not the people on the board. You're right. But we need to figure out better ways. I live in a condominium. I own my condominium. I am not a renter, yet my neighbors can't access me because we're in a locked community. I have neighbors who are renters. You need a new metric, not renters versus homeowners, but single families versus multifamilies. And Marcy Homes is rapidly developing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to let folks know, in case you're counting numbers, we're officially at number 20. We have 40, so we're halfway there. So we have Dennis F., followed by Corwin M., and then Corey L.
Hi, I'm Dennis Fazio. I'm the treasurer of the Bryn Mawr Neighborhood Association. I've been involved in nonprofit organizations and the creation, governance, and management for a couple of decades or more. But I'd like to address here some of the diversity and outreach requirement details of the recommendations. Bryn Mawr strongly supports the majority of this proposal and the inclusion and the goals of inclusion and diversity of leadership and participation, but some requirements may be counterproductive. There's often a temptation for governmental bodies to micromanage the how, often to the detriment of the what. In this case, focusing on specific solutions like board profiles and meeting counts and board is the only place for leadership opportunity may not be the best approach. When rewards are involved, individuals and teams will focus on what is measured. If you reward head counts and meeting counts, you'll get those, but you won't necessarily be accomplishing your real goals in a meaningful way. You do have requirements for annual diversity and outreach plans that can be tailored to each neighborhood's character and needs. You can set quantifiable measures in those plans specific to that neighborhood, allowing the goals of inclusion and expansion to be met in a variety of ways. If there are outlier exclusionary neighborhoods, deal with them with focused plans rather than imposing limitations on all the other struggling boards. When you draft the guidelines, please focus on the what and the why. Remove the micromanagement of the how.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Corwin M., followed by Corey Lynn, and then with Grace B. After that.
Hi, this feels like home. I was up here a couple times before, years ago. My name is Corwin H. Morton III. I'm chaplain of the Sons of the American Legion, Squadron 1. I'm also a ward missionary with my Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I live in the SSCO neighborhood, Stevens Square Community Organization. And there's a lot of things that I've noticed in the 35 years I've been in this community, which is quite a while. First of all, a lot of the minorities do not get noticed. Whether they want to or not, that's another thing. Seeming as I've been to a lot of the meetings, public housing meetings, as well as community meetings and so on and so forth, where there is no Mexican representation, or there's no Somali representation, but there's plenty of, shall we say, black or Caucasian or any other race. And we need to come together. Our big thing in the communities is not, okay, I don't like you because you got a wrong color. No, we need to get together with that person. We need to talk to everybody. We need to find out what everybody needs. That's the main thing that the Lord thy God mentioned when he put us on this earth, is to get along and to do what we must do. And that's basically what I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Corey L., followed by Grace B., and then Tabitha M.
Hi, Chair Cunningham. Hello, council members. My name is Corey Lynn, and I'm a renter at Ward 8 and a staff member at Powderhorn Neighborhood. The next three statements that you'll hear frame Powderhorn Neighborhood's concerns for the neighborhood system and from our experiences and struggles to serve and connect Powderhorn. The city, community, and existing neighborhoods have already invested so much time and energy into our neighborhood system, into our grassroots ecosystem to support civic engagement. NRP and CPP have spent over $360 million already, not including the sweat, volunteer hours, and emotional labors from the people in this room. While the investment is clear, one glaring reality is and will continue to be the variety of ways that each neighborhood organization is operated, since they are independent 501c3s and every neighborhood has different needs. Some orgs don't have enough funding to hire more than one staff or staff at all. Many rely on volunteer hours to operate on the day-to-day. With these differences, the current framework misses the chance to account for these inherent differences and to create goals that are also variable, rather than one size fits all. If I was to go off of what Karina was saying about having a hashtag, it would be hashtag no unfunded mandates.
Thank you. Next up, we have Grace B, followed by Tabitha M, and then Mike. Excuse me.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham and the rest of the committee. My name is Grace Berkey, and I rent in Ward 1, but I'm also on staff with Corey at the Powderhorn Neighborhood Association. And I'm going to build off of some of the comments that she started with. It's clear to us that NCR has captured a lot of feedback, not only in the last several months, but in the last few years. But it seems that a glaring summary of this feedback points out that the community has a desire for a program that takes into account an organization's capacity while driving meaningful, measurable, and positive outcomes. The current framework places emphasis on expectations and qualifications for funding without regard for an organization's overall budget and staff that's needed to execute those expectations and requirements. The city's stated expectations for neighborhood organizations are to identify and act on neighborhood priorities, influence city decisions on policies, programs, and services, and increase involvement in civic and community life. It's crucial that an organization's budget, staff, and health are considered when making framework that can drive those outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Tabitha M, followed by Mike F, and then Becky T.
Chair Cunningham, Vice Chair Gordon, who has stepped out of the room, and the rest of the present council members. I'm going to go off script just a little bit because I don't want to forget to say this, because I've been inspired by some of the comments that have been made today. I just want to encourage you, whatever vote you cast, it is not a binary decision. Those that are asking for a delay, it has nothing to do with the ideal that we are not for inclusivity and diversity in our communities. Let it be known that this is a fundamental decision with respect to how we see the totality of the framework that has been put forward. It does not speak to our understanding of the value of each and every single person in our citizenry. I'll get right to business. The NRP and CPP program that the city has been investing in over the past several decades has been a material and valuable source of support to PPNA's ability to advance its missional aims. However, other contributed and earned income sources that we have been able to secure is what allows PPNA to operate as a fully functioning, holistic, small but mighty organization. We asked the Peace Committee not to pass the NCR Department's current Neighborhood 2020 framework, but solely advance the Council's directive for the staff to undertake that has been stated in the document. The city will benefit mightily from a new framework that does more than state what an organization should do to qualify for program funding, but provide Peace Committee members with a framework that facilitates and embraces a range of engagement and practices. We also need a framework that deals squarely with organizational capacity and health, maintaining a framework with underlying goals that can be best, if not only, achieved with healthy organizations, and then not know if your existing neighborhood organization partners are healthy and sustainable, will continue to perpetuate a disconnect between program expectations and what reasonably can be achieved. I say no more. We can do better, but you have to ask the right questions.
Thank you so much. If I could take a quick second to insert just really quick, I just want to reflect back that what I'm hearing, while it may be a differing opinions, that overall the underlying values of better, stronger, and better supported neighborhood associations is what I'm hearing. So we have, this is a really amazing opportunity of democracy in action, being able to hear varying opinions with a shared underlying goals and purpose. So I just wanted to reflect that back, that that's what we're hearing for sure. So hashtag hear that. So next up we have Mike F, followed by Becky T, followed by Katie J.
Thank you. My name is Mike Farron. I live at 4820 35th Avenue South. I'm a former Nokomis East Neighborhood Association board chair. I'm currently the executive director for the Beltrami Neighborhood Council. And for the sake of not being too repetitive with a lot of what we've heard here today, maybe just want to acknowledge why we're all here in the first place, whether you're a community member, board member, staff person, perhaps why you fine people all ran for city council in the first place was to make a difference and to improve your community. And although we're not able to change the world or affect, federal change or even state change, we can do some really great things in our neighborhoods, and we've been hearing about them from several individuals so far. It's really the grassroots type efforts, and I'm concerned over the future of neighborhoods. I would just like to echo the fact that I think we should pause for a moment and really put forward the best plan and dedicated funding. That's really a big thing. And it's my first year being a staff person, and to worry year over year basically where your funding is going to come from. If you can continue doing the work that your community members have supported over the years, I would just echo to possibly involve a third party and delay the process for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next up, we have Becky T, followed by Katie J, and then Amy L.
Good afternoon. This is perhaps my favorite committee because the two representatives for the Neenah area, Johnson and Schrader, are here, and Chair Cunningham is my personal council member. I want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone who's been in this room, who's been in so many different rooms over the past month, talking, sharing, thinking about how to improve this framework, sharing how amazingly we do our work, how we listen to our communities, and how we respond. Today, I think, is actually a referendum on the NCR department and on this document. I like what it says about the vision. I like what the principles say. I really doubt that the way the department is constructed really can make that happen. We have outreach contracts with the health department for the city, with energy, I sat through a business training this week, and these are amazing. And I got the training that I needed to go back to my community. I haven't had a neighborhood specialist since August, and I haven't noticed. We need our contracts changed, and that happens. I've been around for 8 years, and I think the city could do a lot better when it comes to neighborhoods. I think there could be a lot more done with this document to make the vision reality. I just don't think that actually I was disappointed. This doesn't have vision. This is what a regulatory agency would give. It doesn't have what the community has told us. It doesn't have the voice. We have this many comments, but where are those voices here? This is just, you should do this with your bylaws. You should have this neighborhood day. Those are great, but where is the vision? I want my neighborhood that I work for and the one that I live in to really be served by neighborhood associations. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Becky. Shout out to Ward 4. Next up, we have Katie J, followed by Amy L, and then Lisa D. Do we have Katie Jones in the house? Oh, no, it's okay.
Hi, Chair Cunningham, Peace Committee. My name is Katie Jones, and I currently serve on the Lowry Hill East Neighborhood Association, lovingly known as the Wedge. And I first want to say that I actually am very much in support of the general framework of this document. I like that there's accountability to that. I think as a citizen, I expect for taxpayer dollars that are given to organizations have some accountability with them. On the same hand, I would like to make sure that neighborhoods can successfully achieve that level of accountability. And I think this general framework hopefully gives us a good guidance. I would just want to make sure that NCR can make things simple. I know there are a number of documents that NCR would like for the neighborhoods to give and provide. And if those can be made online, streamlined through surveys and Google Documents or something like that, that would really help for keep down the level of bureaucracy. One thing that I wanted to push, I noticed that there'd be potential funding for CBOs. I would hope that the May Day parade would be considered as part of that type of funding. It's not in my neighborhood, but I love it. And a couple of more implementation aspects just to consider. when it comes to, I know there was a portion in there in the previous document that mentioned door knocking, and that there just some realistic expectations around door knocking. I've done a lot of door knocking in my neighborhood. We're 85% renter, and so we door knock the apartment buildings, we door knock triplexes, and just it takes a lot of volunteer hours, and obviously as elected officials, you've done a lot of door knocking yourselves and know what the conversion rate can be. And so we're doing our best. I do want to mention that actually we did a Get Out the Vote campaign this year, and now for the first time in the last election for a state level election, we actually met the same percentage of turnout as the rest of the city, and that was the first time in the last 10 years. So neighborhoods can do good things, and I hope that you continue funding us. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your work with that Getting Out the Vote campaign. Thank you. Next up, we have Amy L., followed by Lisa D., which is number 30, and then followed by Sarah Lynn R. Amy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilman Cunningham and members of the committee. My name is Amy Lucebrink, and I staff the Shingle Creek Neighborhood Association. It's been my pleasure to be doing that for several years. And unfortunately, most of the board members, we went from 8 board members in April to 14. Just in a matter of 2 weeks, I'm here in front of you today. So they haven't even seen this document in order to really contribute. Today, I'm hearing that there might be an NCR review, and I'm hoping that the voices that are in the room today would be included somehow in that kind of review, because I think it would be healthy to have that input. Today, I'd like to talk about the work. What is the work that we will be doing? NRP was about planning and investing in this city based on goals of the city of Minneapolis, right? Then we went to community engagement, all needed, but those two separate cause problems. If they could be combined, if there's a way to combine them so that there's an incentive to bring people to the table that is meaningful work to help the city. We're going to have a Minneapolis 2040 plan that is going to change North Minneapolis in a way we have not seen before. And I just know that we are going to need more planning, more investment, and that being directed from the baseline level would be healthy. I want to talk about the work that I do. Right now, our contracts were established in 2016 for this particular 17 and 19 process. The application was, and we were to do community participation efforts, building organizational capacity, building neighborhood relationships, work with city departments, involve engage stakeholders, then list your policies and documents. But as far as reporting goes, measures and process mean a lot to me. If we're not doing the work, then, we don't deserve to get the dollars. So in looking at the report, if the inclusion for equity and inclusion and diversity could be included in the reporting end, on the front end, rather than trying to hit a target that we don't know about, that would be great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Amy. Next up, we have Lisa D., followed by Sarah Lynn R., then Kelly S.
Okay, so hello, council members. My name is Lisa D., and I'm from the McKinley community, and so I wanted to talk about something very important. First thing I want to do is I want to talk about a case that I have filed with the Minneapolis Department of Civil Rights. The number is MDCR, file number 1904262. And the nature of my complaint, I want to read it. I am a former board member of McKinley Community Associations. During my time serving as a board member, I was the only person of color. The rest of the board members were white. I believe I was treated differently and denied accommodations to serve on the board because of my race, African American. Additionally, I have observed McKinley community conduct practices that prevented or discouraged members of the community, as well as myself, from participating in the activities and decision-making that would impact the community, predominantly a community of color. I believe I was retaliated against for raising these issues, along with violations of the organization's bylaws. I was removed from my position on the board and have been removed from the respondents' mailing list. I want to say that as a member of the board of Board of Directors, when it comes to the Neighborhood 2020, McKinley was not made aware of any decisions being made, even through our work group. The member of our work group that's supposed to represent the community is not a resident of our community. We have no input from our neighborhood churches, our businesses, and that's important when it comes to decisions being made specifically in North Minneapolis. That is a majority of people of color, not only African American, but of all different racial backgrounds. I would like the City Council to commit to the community to making sure that there is no conflict of interest with the council members Felipe Cunningham and the McKinley Board of Directors Chair Lane Cunningham, as well as a staff member with MCR that is also a subject of my complaint. On behalf of the residents and the McKinney community, and as the board, I request transparency through the board. My position is not to be intrusive, demanding, or intimidate the council member, but my efforts is to make sure that there's fairness and inclusivity in all major decisions that affect the lives of residents living in Minneapolis. I expect the City of Minneapolis, I request that the City of Minneapolis give neighborhood organizations the option to operate privately, in partnership, and without strict dictatorship. I want to make a quote from Martin Luther King. A riot is the language of the unheard, and our votes are counted, but our voices are not heard. And we don't have to rally or riot if we're welcome at the table and efforts are being kept, and efforts to keep us away are not mischievous. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Sarah Lynn R., followed by Kelly S., and then Steve B.
Hello, my name is Sarah Lynn Romanishin. I live in Lowry Hill East neighborhood, The Wedge. I've been a neighborhood board member, chaired committees, and treasurer. I volunteer just not within the neighborhood structure, but also with coalitions and community groups, my union, and have been a Neighborhoods 2020 work group member. I practice what I preach. I work hard to include people in real engagement, information sharing, and decision making, and I am willing to hold people accountable that are not. I'm no newbie here to be snowed by double talk and PR campaigns. I work with people in every walk of life. I grew up here and understand that our city is not equitable in any way. I know there are a lot of problems with the current system at both the city and the neighborhoods. What does this mean? It means I get it. And I'm cynical and yet still hopeful, which is a seriously hard place to inhabit when you live in Minneapolis. And it means I'm against the NCR plan, and I'm asking you to vote no. Why? Because I know better. This authoritarian and crudely drafted plan sets NCR up to police and control independent neighborhoods, which is not acceptable. There is no excuse for what I see in the new plan and how it was created. The way any plan is created is the biggest tell as to how it will be implemented. And this says it all, ignoring knowledgeable and caring comments, PR campaigns in the press, steamrolling, omissions, and misdirection. Please vote against NCR's plan, take a step back, and work hand in hand with the neighborhoods, NCEC, the NRP Policy Board and state legislature, and Cura, but also Augsburg. Because it is actually Augsburg that has done all the research with neighborhood associations, not Cura. So they need to be part of this program. And let's come up with something that shows this city government thinks more about the residents than itself. Let's start following IAP 2 and be a real participatory democracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Kelly S., followed by Steve B., and then Meredith H. Okay, if you want to make sure you turn it into the city clerk, that would be appreciated. All right, so then next up we have Steve B., followed by Meredith H., and then I'm so sorry, I cannot read the first name, but the last name is Zafar.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Steve Birch. I live at 4401 Washburn Avenue South. I represent the London Hills Neighborhood Council. Without question, we believe that the goals and visions inside of the document that has been put together are admirable and supportable. So our issue is nothing to do with the goals and vision, equity, or anything like that. We believe that the problem is simply this, that if you look at the resources typically provided to the NCR in order to support the neighborhoods, that it doesn't add up when it comes to the requirements that are being levied upon the neighborhoods. So what we did is we decided to look at just our neighborhood, because you have to approve the amount of money that goes out to the neighborhoods. And the math for the amount of money that goes to neighborhoods based on the allocations in the plan. This is the 75%, the 25%, and then the 75% bleed down to 50%, 25%. There are insufficient funds coming to the neighborhoods if this plan is adopted as is, and if the city council continues to fund the CPP program like it has in the past. So when we did the math on this thing, it doesn't work. We wouldn't even have enough money coming in our base funding to have one person part-time for 25 hours per week. So we believe the goals are good. You can approve the goals. But unless the city council is willing to do something about the funding, you have approved a plan, a strategy that does not have the resources to be executed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. Next up, we have Meredith H., followed by our friend with the last name Zafar, and then Kevin A. Is Meredith still here? No? See, Terrence, are you going to be speaking? I was going to speak at the end. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and wait until the end, and I'll hold off on Meredith. So then we have M. Zafar. Marnie? Okay, I'm so sorry, I couldn't read it. So Marnie, we have you up, then Kevin A., followed by Jean M., and we are number 37.
Hello to all councilmen, as well as to Cam, who is I am the president of the Seward Neighborhood Group, and I am also a resident of Seward for, I think, about 20 years. I have found that over my years in the Seward neighborhood, I have seen much change, of which there has been a great deal of diversity within our neighborhood that has been influxed. I think the basic framework, if we are going to be given money, obviously there are certain things the city should ask of us. However, there are certain things that when one is asked to, in a way, say, if you have so many people in this neighborhood, you have to have so many people on the board. Well, you also have people who may or may not want to be on the board, who may feel, for a variety of reasons, they would rather do things through their own communities in conjunction with us. We have a wonderful board member, Mohammed, who is living in the towers, who is working with our community organizer to bring young people in the towers who are East African to work with the Sierra Club. And these are initiatives that our board embraces and actually supports. And we have issues of the fact that we live in perhaps one of the most diverse boards and one of the most activist communities in all of the neighborhoods. And I guess where there are certain parts of the Neighborhood 2020 which are palatable, I would say, there are others with respect to monies that neighborhood boards, neighborhood communities, neighborhood organizations need to be supported in a way that when you ask for the kinds of volunteerism that you are, well, having volunteers is one thing. Being able to marshal the forces to get out to a neighborhood one by one and to communicate the goals, and also to hear back from the community members, the boards, what those goals are, needs money. And we are part of the city, and the city is part of us. And that's what I say.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Kevin A., followed by Jean M., then Al F. And I just want to look to the city clerk. Do we have any other folks signed up to speak?
Hello.
Yes, I mean, another sheet. We got it.
Thank you, council members. My name is Kevin Aldwark. I'm at 1701 44th Avenue North. I'm in the Weber Camden Neighborhood Organization. I served as a board member, VP, chair briefly. We recognize everything that's in this policy before it came out. Some of us saw that our neighborhood were not all inclusive, lacking accountability, and we acted on it. That's why we have some of those wonderful people here as new chair and new board. I also would like to thank you specifically and Council Member Gordon for listening to our concerns. I feel that the draft came a long way, but I still urge you not to approve it today. Here for 3 reasons. Wanted to remind you that the Neighborhood Organization Program is a program recognized by the United Nations. It's a program used as an example around the world. We need to fund that fully. Here also, that from my review, I see that the proposed funding would further impede the good work that neighborhood organizations do. More bureaucracy and more restriction when we need more flexibility. Each neighborhood is different. Their needs are different. And third, I feel like NRC had failed both of us, the neighborhood organization program and city council. With all due respect to Director Rubidor and the wonderful staff they have, they didn't go the extra mile with accountability or with support. They trusted, but they didn't verify. When we needed support, we got minimal support. I feel that their plan to put neighborhood against each other to compete for funding will further damage this. And if we lack funding, take the 25% off of NCR funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. For the House. Next up, we have Jean M., followed by Al F., and then Ms. Nicole M.
My name is Joan Menken. That's fine. I live in the Southeast Como neighborhood. I'm here on my own behalf. But we have talked about this over a long period of time. The 2020 plan regulates. It doesn't help or participate in supporting neighborhoods. And I look at it as a totally top-down process. Neighborhood groups are doing the city's work. Fund them, period. This may seem like a little thing. There were so many good comments. I didn't want to be redundant. I will stand on what many people have already said. One specific item that shows how neighborhoods are different. You look at little things like having a common election day for boards. Nonsense. Our neighborhood is 60% students. I live in the Southeast Como neighborhood. In the spring, students move out. Other families move out. The population changes completely. That's why we changed our bylaws to have elections in the fall. We have a annual meeting in the fall and our elections in the fall. If you decide to go citywide with an election in the spring, we will lose half of our board. And you will have people like me on our board forever. So if you want diversity, you have to be sensitive to the differences in neighborhoods also. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joan. Next up, we have Al F., followed by Ms. Nicole M. and J.W. Mr. Flowers, you're up. I was doing abbreviations.
Oh, Al F. Okay. I like that, you know. No, I just came down to support. I like some things that David Rubidor is trying to do with the neighborhood association, especially on diversity and inclusion. And so I'm here to hope that we do have inclusion. You can see where we are at now. The people that have the most difficulty in their neighborhoods. That's why some said neighborhoods are different, but the ones that have the most difficulty are not in the room now. And so people like myself have to come up and speak up and talk about equity and diversity and inclusion. And this is something that you ran on, Councilmember Cunningham, that you was going to make sure that we had equity and diversity in the neighborhoods. I thought I heard that a few times. So I'm asking the city council to, whatever we do, we need to make sure that a percentage goes to out in the neighborhoods so we can recruit and do better
to get people involved that don't think the neighborhood associations are important or don't think it has anything to do with them when it really does. So I'm asking that we do things that's inclusive and that we can recognize in layman term, not according to the neighborhood or the city council, but that any person in the city of Minneapolis can understand the whole plan. And I think what Rubador is doing is heading that way. We might need some tweaking, but it's heading that way. And I know it's work, what he's been doing over the years with neighborhood associations. So I read it and I support it, but I would like for more in my community to know about this. They're not saying anything. I'd like to talk about it on the radio, saying you need to get involved. If you want your community to be safe and vibrant, you need to be a part of it. So I hope y'all really look at it and give it a fair shot here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flowers. Up next, we have Miss Nicole M., followed by J.W., and then Danny T.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Cunningham and other council members and residents. I live in Falwell, which is in Camden, which is in Northside, which is in Minneapolis, and I feel a strong sense of citizenship to all of these places, mainly Falwell, because that is my neighborhood. Now, the few people, 4 or 5 people that support this proposal, talked a lot about diversity and inclusion. And the question I would ask is, what have they done to make that a possibility? 3 years ago in Falwell, people with privilege, people like Danielle Tejan, people like Nate Streeter, they started getting out and talking to neighbors and saying something's wrong with our association. It is not representing our community. It is not meeting the needs of the people that live here. And we started a grassroots organizing campaign that led to changing our whole board and getting a new board, getting new leadership, which included that board electing me as their chair, a renter in Falwell. I am no longer on the board. I'm still very active in Falwell. And what I know to be true is you cannot mandate compassion. You cannot mandate humane behavior. That has to come from the grassroots. So the neighborhoods that don't want renters and don't want people of color and don't want people from the LGBT community, the communities that are set that way and don't want that included in their boards, you can't mandate them to include them. As the sister spoke earlier about her lawsuit, even when we get in those rooms, we're treated like garbage. The work we're doing in Falwell is very intricate work. It's not just being able to line people up and go, oh, look, brown, black, white, brown, black. No, we are coaching people. Marginalized and disenfranchised people can't just walk into a boardroom and know how they function and operate. There has to be a lot of intentional relationship building that happens so that those people can feel strong and supported. And a lot of those people are coming with challenges that other people don't have to deal with. It takes a lot of work to do this. And using this guideline, this book with all these comments, what I want to know is what percentage of the information in here actually got into the document, because I'm guessing it's a very low percentage. I want us to take our time and do this right, or not do it at all and keep doing what was working, because we're finally to the point where we're getting things to work.
Thank you, Ms. Nicole. Proud of Ward 4 turning out today. Thank you. Next up, we have JW, followed by Danny T, and then C. Terrence.
You guys didn't build this for me, did you? Anyway. Peace. Thank you all for caring so much. Thank you all for caring. My name is Jay Webb. I'm the executive director of the International Gateway. For all of you who may not listen, Council, I say in the future, but Councilwoman Connell in her district, it's between it's on Lake Street from Columbus all the way to Blaisdell, and it's one of the hardest hit areas for drug abuse, prostitution, homelessness. We're not a neighborhood association, but we feel all the neighborhood associations, because the strength and the weakness of any neighborhood is in things are challenges, homelessness, drugs, and so we get people from everywhere to come here. Not to labor on that, but I want to thank you all, like Mad Dads, Urban Venture, Shiloh Temple, where I attend, all the neighborhood associations. I really want to touch on the city because they've made adjustments within the zoning and the neighborhood association. I'm a builder also, and so sometimes we have a chance to have assisted living in a place, and neighborhood associations, they say no, but if you want the plant to do better, you have to take it out of its environment that's not thriving in. And so right now, many of the assisted living in places that they're all in the same place. And so it's like, oh, I'm getting healed, but you're going into the same toxicity. So we just hope that we can all open up our arms and work along with the city, because the plan is no good if it doesn't have a vision, and it doesn't have, everyone has their places. It's chemistry. Right now we have protons and neutrons, but we need an electron. That's the energy that we weren't really there, but it was our impression. I'm considered like the ant, not because of my size, but because of consciousness. And that's because of all of us. We have this power of consciousness that we can either stay within Minneapolis and just take care of our own. We could strengthen here and then bolster out and be a model to other cities. Last thing, 30, I'm sorry, I hope that was going to be the last one, so I get extra 30 seconds, but what this is all about is that we have the power to change the world right now. And it's a different definition of love. It's called linking our values and efforts. There is no leader. The vision is the leader. It's visionary leadership. So right now it's our opportunity that we can all come together and say, hey, I know you all saw you at the meeting. Hey, what would you guys like to do? What would you like to, what's your vision? How can we help you? And so that's our strength right now. And we can change the world one world at a time. Your world, his world, your world, our world. If that's our commitment, then we'll go far. But if we're locked into our, oh, this is my compartment, this is my race, this is this, no. Anyway, I am Minneapolis. I'm the world just like you. I'm the universe. We're all. Let's not limit ourselves. Let's not limit ourselves. Let's stretch out. That's why it's International Gateway. We have the power to embrace all different cultures. Peace. God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Next, so we're on our last three here. So we have Danny T, followed by C. Terrence, and then Marcus M.
Hi, Councilmember Cunningham. My name is Danny Dejan, and I live in the Fowell neighborhood. I'm the volunteer admin for the NNC, and I would never take their voice. There's members of them all throughout. If you could raise your hand. Members of the NNC, which represent all of the Northside neighborhood associations. I'm also staff at the Fowell Neighborhood Association. I do want to thank council. I want to thank all the work groups. I participated on work group 3. I do want to thank NCR for their time and attention in all of this. A lot of work has been put into this, and it's very personal because it's where we live. It's where all of our issues kind of come together, which makes place-based issues and organizing unique in the role in which it plays in the city. But the two things that I wanted to point out, and a little bit to what Ms. Nicole said, is that when you're bringing a diverse group of people in economics, in education, in religion, in culture, in race, that is going to stir up and bring forth real, deep-rooted issues and trauma. And we will perpetuate harm and trauma on communities if we are not preparing them and setting them up to deal with all of those microaggressions and massive aggressions of the way that that can play out. It's personal. And so we need more time. We need time and money in order to fund that kind of revolutionary work, to make sure that we are building and growing from a place of health and not something that's regulatory. And to something that Mr. Flowers said, what is fascinating to me is, and what I love is everybody here wants the same thing, much to what you said. One of my biggest concerns is the way that cultural groups and neighborhood associations continue to be not just separated, but no links between the two. Al Flowers wanted to know why this wasn't on the radio. NCR has a cultural specialist that is on KMOJ, And nothing ever is bridging that gap to talk about that culture coming and building with neighborhood associations. And so there's a gap there that needs to be addressed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Danny. Next up, we have C. Terrence and then Marcus M.
Council members, Peace Committee, it's good to be here. I'm here representing the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs at the University of Minnesota. We do a lot of work with the folks that are in this room. We've trained many leaders on community organizing. We've done plenty of community-based research to kind of talk about the issues that are important to the groups that are in here. We have grants that these groups apply for all the time to do the important work that they're doing. In fact, our most recent neighborhood partnership initiative, which funds a year-long organizing campaign, out of the 65 applications, I think 25 of them came from groups that were in this room. This work needs to be funded. These groups want to do good work. These groups recognize racial equity as important. We partner with them because we believe that residents are the most powerful force for justice in their communities. Yeah, absolutely. But we also recognize that we're coming from a complicated history, right? BIPOC communities have been left out of these conversations, been left out of these structures, both in history and today. And so goals around diversity are absolutely important, but we also have to recognize that they're not the destination. One way to say it is diversity shouldn't mean how do we get people who look different to do the same things that we've always done, but how do we bring people with different sets of experiences, relationships, intentions, and good work to bring fullness to the work that we're doing. And so I think we can talk about diversity, but we can also envision something greater than that too. And I think a lot of these groups here today, like Falwell, like Bryant, like Cleveland, like Powderhorn, and others, Corcoran, Nokomis East, all these groups that are in here today do great work. They want to do more great work. How do we have a plan and a framework to allow them to do more of that great work? I think here we'll continue to be a partner with the city, continue to be a partner. I think, as David and I have talked about, we do different levels of the system's work. We're going to train folks, we're going to do research, but how we imagine those things together, greater than where we are now, I think CURE is committed to do that, given the opportunity. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Last up, we have Marcus M.
Hi there, Stephen.
No, Marcus.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marcus Mills. I'm out of the Marcy Homes neighborhood. As many of you know, I've had several hats or roles in this process, and just wanted to speak to a few quick points of that. I was a part of this when it got started. The Neighborhoods 2020 was originally a community group, a committee out of the NCEC organization, and I was one of the co-chairs in the second round of it. We've been working on this for a few years. And for much of that time, NCR had been allies. They helped us in a number of ways, and they've been reasonable stewards of a couple of these ideas. Unfortunately, somewhere near the end, this turned in a different direction. I will say that of what I believe should be a worthwhile aspect in these talks, in these negotiations, in the continued work that I believe needs to happen, we need autonomous neighborhoods. They are vital to an aspect of the way we operate that gives both you and we residents much more capability to interface, to be represented, to represent ourselves with you, and to create effective relationships around. Also, we need the community, the cultural communities that make up the fabric of this city to have their own representation. As we've seen, they have not as well integrated into neighborhoods as we like, and we need organizations that are committed to both representing them, creating new relationships, and helping to integrate with neighborhoods and speak to the city in ways that neighborhoods haven't quite been able to at this moment, which is part of what this work has always been, trying to get those gaps closed and those conversations happening. We need equity, and equity requires investment. Investment in how we achieve equity will require people, will require time, patience, creativity, and perseverance. we need all those invested in this work to be working together as we move forward. And I've heard that there is a proposal that people have brought the idea of taking the time to do that work going forward, so that there is a chance for us all to work together to achieve the goals that we are all searching for. I am in absolute favor of that time being taken to do this work, and I commit myself to helping you with this work, to helping anyone willing to do this work as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. All right, so with that, that is all of the speakers who have signed up to speak. Is there anyone else interested in speaking before we close the public hearing today? Ms. Kathy, you're up. If you'll state your name and address for the record, that would be greatly appreciated.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Spann. I am Executive Director of the Jordan Area Community Council, but I actually live in Willard Hay. One of the things that I'm going to ask you to do is look at this document not from the lens as an elected official, but from the lens actually of a resident. What I'm asking you is, does it answer the question that it is intended to say? The Neighborhoods 2020 initiative recommends a new approach to funding that would carry forward after December 2020. Does it answer that question? I'm going to say that Jordan Area Community Council is very grateful to the city of Minneapolis, because in the 70s and 80s, we spent millions and millions of dollars in housing development and business development, and we're really grateful for the NRP funding and then ultimately for CPP funding. It is an amazing opportunity. But right now, today, I ask you to not look through the lens as a city or elected official. Take that lens off, but look at this document as a resident where you live. Does it actually address the question in which it is saying funding beyond 2020? I want another thing that it does, and it asks us several things that we already do. We already provide bylaws. We already look at conflict resolution documents. We already look at diversity. We already do our bylaws. We already do the things that they ask us to do. But one of the things where they have failed in NCR, and they know that I have addressed this with them, things that they should have been doing right from the beginning, where it says training, technical assistance, and tools and resources. Have they been, over the years, been providing this to neighborhood associations? You ask us to change, you ask us to be accountable, but I'm going to tell you that you cannot ask us what you as a city has just recently done. NCR department, within the last 5 to 7 years, they themselves have brought on cultural specialists. This has not been done in 1980, 1990. This was not done. This has just been done within the last 5 to 7 years. So you ask us, once again, to be accountable. I ask you to look at you being accountable for us as citizens as well. And what the things that it is saying that it's going to do in the future, you ask the question. I want you to ask the question once again, not as elected officials, but as residents. Have they been providing training, technical assistance, and tools and resources over the years? That is what I ask you to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spann. Is there anyone else who is interested in speaking who did not sign up? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing no further speakers, I now close the public hearing. Do I need to do a motion for that? Okay, just want to make sure I'm covering all the bases. All right, so with that, I now will open up the discussion with my colleagues, because I know that I will save my staff direction, but I wanted to go ahead and open it up to my colleagues. Council Member Gordon.
I'm happy to start things, I guess, here. I really appreciate everybody coming in and talking about this and sharing the thoughts here, but also through the months that led up to this. I personally believe that support for neighborhood organizations is critical to the city, and I see this as an important step along a long pathway that we've been following. Easily goes back to that framework that some of us worked on a long time ago, the Community Engagement Task Force. People talked about the blueprint for equity. I also think we laid out clearly in our comprehensive plan that there's support for neighborhoods. There's that famous 14th goal, the 14th one, right? that we put in there and also the whole policy about that. Also, in the last time we did our budget, we laid out a 5-year projection, making a commitment to funding. I think getting this framework, getting a council approval of a framework is going to be critical to that effort moving forward. I certainly recognize that this absolutely we need to do more work. This is kind of a touch point here, so I think we're smarter to use it as a pivot point where we're able to approve a framework and let people know that the council continues to be committed strongly to neighborhood organizations and to working for the future and within what parameters that is. And then I'm excited about the potential to see our staff work with Cura or others and continue to work on that as we develop program guidelines and refine that. I have a couple amendments I'd like to make on the framework resolution that is in our packet that is authored by the Chair Cunningham. So I don't know if it's appropriate for me to move that approval, item number 1 now, so that I can move those amendments, and if it is, I would like to move that.
Councilmember Gordon has moved approval of item number 1. Let me pull that up, which is the passage of the resolution approving the Neighborhoods 2020 framework recommendations. I will start off so I'll open it up for conversation, discussion, and I'll kick it off. I will say that while I am the author of the resolution, that I actually do not support it moving forward. As the representative of the Northside community, it was made to me very clear unanimously by the neighborhood associations in my ward that folks wanted an entire delay, and that's what I'm bringing forward today. I think that it's possible for the council to say that neighborhood associations matter, and also for us to be able to rethink the process in which we're having this conversation. I don't think we necessarily need to move approval of the framework in order to demonstrate that. We already have the motion on the table right now, but I will go ahead and share the staff direction. I won't move it now, but I wanted to go ahead and share so folks know transparently what I will be bringing forward. The staff direction reads, and clerk, do we have, I printed off extra copies. Are they, okay, so if folks are interested, they are available over there, but I will read it here. So Neighborhood and Community Relations Department staff, in partnership with Finance and Property Services staff and others as needed, are directed to do the following. Collaborate with the University of Minnesota's Center for Urban and Regional Affairs, CURA, to complete the resident-led process of furthering the Neighborhoods 2020 framework and developing program guidelines at the collaborate level of engagement based on the IAP2 spectrum. This process is to be completed by October 26, 2019. And I want to read so folks know transparently what the collaborate level of the IAP2 spectrum is. The goal is to partner with the public in each aspect of the decision, including the development of alternatives and the identification of a preferred solution. And then a promise to the public is that we will work together with you to formulate solutions and incorporate your advice and recommendations into the decisions to the maximum extent possible. So getting back to my staff direction, aspects of the work should include but are not limited to the development of overall goals, program goals and outcomes. This is getting to the why, as folks had asked for. The development of metrics to measure progress towards goals, defining a racial equity analysis of neighborhood association operations and activities, the development of a logic model that includes inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes, convening the governance and funding work groups, as well as including additional stakeholders such as, but not limited to, NRP policy board members, NCEC commissioners, members of neighborhood associations, and those currently not engaged in neighborhood associations, identifying a budget-neutral structure for NCR to best support neighborhood associations, defining a preferred funding stream for ongoing funding of neighborhood associations, leveraging the work completed thus far development of the Neighborhoods 2020 framework and program guidelines. This work is to be reported back to the Peace Committee on October 26, 2019, and will be posted for public comment. The final draft is to go before the Peace Committee on November 18th, 2019, with final approval by the City Council on November 22nd. So I just want to share with folks, there are a couple of, this was based on the conversations that I've had with neighborhood associations, primarily on the north side, but with the public comment from all over the city, this was reflected. And so the reason why I believe that we should not pass the framework and just focus on the guidelines is because I think it's possible for us to do that work at the same time. There has already been an amazing amount of work that has gone into this framework being developed between staff time as well as community members putting a lot of time into this, whether it's the art of hosting, whether it's the work groups, whether it's public comment, that there has been a lot for us to use as a framework that we can then further and really be able to ultimately have the community define, this is the framework that we would like to see moving forward. Then from there, being able to then talk about the how we got to get the why clear and then get to the how, and that's the program guidelines. Also, what I feel like is missing is an explicit racial equity analysis. We talk a lot about diversity, but again, diversity for diversity's sake is not enough. We need to talk about why does it matter that folks are at the table, and much to a point that was made is that it's not about getting different folks from different backgrounds to the table to do the same kind of work, but actually to transform the work that's being done. And so that racial equity analysis is really going to push us to be able to do that. I also talk about the reason why I support a logic model. For folks who don't know, it's just kind of a general structure that will clearly define what are the inputs. So how much money, what are the staff time, volunteer time. The activities are what does NCR do, what do neighborhoods do, what are the outputs, the amount of people engaged, the amount of doors knocked, the amount of people who attend events, and then the outcomes, for example, better connected neighborhoods, or excuse me, better connected neighbors. So like that is an outcome that most neighborhood associations seek to be able to have, is we want to have better connected neighbors. So then how do we measure that? So that will be defined through a logic model. And then I also want to speak to the preferred funding stream for ongoing funding. As of right now, what it's looking like is that there's going to have to be a 7.5% levy increase in order to maintain funding for neighborhood associations at the current level that it's at. That's a pretty large amount. And so I want to be able to give within this process, community space to be able to say, yes, we're okay with that. No, we want to explore other options and be able to dig into what exactly long-term funding will look like for neighborhood associations. I feel as though this staff direction builds on the work that is done rather than discards it and starts over. And I just want to clearly name that. So from there, I saw Councilmember Schrader, then Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. I wanted to speak in favor of both Councilmember Gordon's motion as well as Chair Cunningham's staff direction. I mean, for me, calling for a delay makes me frankly very nervous because what we're talking about today is the framework and not the funding. And for me, funding is the critical issue. Everything you talked about, I think that loud and clear, we need to have neighborhoods. We need to be in a city that values participation, that values that citizen input. And we can keep debating the frameworks. And I mean, I think we have some good work that's been done, and it sounds like will continue to happen. But when it comes down to it, you need to be able to have the capacity to grow, the capacity to continue to do that work. And we need to have that front and center to be talking about the funding. And I think one of the reasons I think just to support Councilmember Gordon's is to really have that debate at City Council. You know, we're having a very, very in the weeds discussion about what neighborhoods could look like without talking about what funding levels will be there. And what I'd like to have the discussion among my colleagues really is, you know, that we support neighborhoods and what level, because it's not going to be an easy call. Myself, I mean, this is something that's very near and dear to my heart, something I care a lot about. This process has been going on. We've heard many times about all the work that's gone into this framework. Myself, in my office, we put that time. You've seen them on the committees. We've worked very hard to make sure that the framework was as best it could be. That said, I've gone out to neighborhoods and I've heard from my community leaders that there's a lack of trust, that their vision is not reflected. So I want to thank the chair for bringing forward the council direction, and I'm hoping having a little more time will make sure that we have all those goals met.
Thank you, Councilmember Schrader. Next up, we have Councilmember Johnson, followed by Councilmember Kano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support your staff direction. I'm not supportive of moving forward with a framework today. When I met with our neighborhood associations, in fact, represented by neighborhood associations from all corners of the city, we took the draft framework and we were talking about redlining it. And what ended up coming up over and over and over again is that it really seems to be missing the larger opportunity here. That the draft framework is essentially the status quo, only leashing or tightening the leash on neighborhood associations. And it misses the larger opportunity of how do we really take it to the next level and step up here and advance these goals. And through that conversation, we really got at this idea of there's a huge lack of trust around how we got here and around this process and around this plan as well. And I look out across this room and I think about the speakers today. We've had speaker after speaker who are some of the very most engaged people in our city. Some of the strongest leaders across our city came out today and spoke, and it was nearly unanimous that this plan is a flawed document. And I think we have, and represented in Councilmember Cunningham's staff direction, is the opportunity to take the step back, to work to rebuild and repair that trust, and to come up with the plan that actually takes it to the next level. I don't think at the end of the day, if this framework does pass, that it's the end of the world, but I think it would be a huge missed opportunity for the city council to stand up and say, we have a system that we can improve upon, and that we are going to take that effort and listen and collaborate and work in partnership to do so. And I also have concerns about this document overall. It avoids a lot of questions that are really important in here, and I don't understand how it isn't a representation, especially how it pits community-based organizations against neighborhood associations. I don't understand how it isn't a cut to funding for neighborhood associations if we're operating under the assumption that a lot of council members have been, that the level of overall funding, the pool made available, would remain the same. In that case, then a 25% set aside for community-based organizations would ultimately be cut to neighborhood associations. But that's just one component of that as well. So I think it would make sense to do a substitute to Councilmember Gordon's motion with the Cunningham staff direction, and then let's see where the votes fall on it. But I'm hopeful that this committee and its members, especially members I know care deeply about our neighborhood associations, will step up and take full advantage of this opportunity here to really put on our creative thinking and be innovative about the system and how we really take it to the next level.
Madam Clerk, if I can get some clarification, I've yet to have a substitute motion put on the table in my committee. Can you please explain the process of what does that look like through Robert's rules?
Chair Cunningham, I'm going to answer your question with a question first. What are you intending to substitute? Because you have 1.1 and 1.2. 1.1 has been moved, which is the resolution. If you're wanting to completely take the resolution off the table and substitute your staff direction, that's one thing.
I would say item number 1, not 1.1 specifically. So do we need to make a motion for the entire item or just Sorry. So we have 1.1 right now that's a motion, so.
So you want to move your staff direction as item 1 instead of having the 2 separate items?
Correct.
Okay. One moment. Chair Cunningham, if you have no objections of just making the substitution, you could certainly move that, or you can put it up to a vote. But if you have no objections, you could just substitute it and move on.
All right.
Objections from committee members?
Yes, I'm assuming that you would object, yeah, since it's not a friendly substitute. All right, so we will just go ahead and stay with it as is, and then we will go from there. Next up, we have Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Councilmember Cunningham. So I first want to thank everybody for coming out here today in the middle of the workday to express your opinions and your ideas. It's really valuable to us. I wish it was more at a more friendly time for folks so that we could see more Latino community members here and other diverse folks engaging. But we know that there's challenges to how all of this is set up. I also want to thank our NCR staff for leading this process. I know that it's hard to take on significant initiatives like this in the middle of really other important things like the driver's license campaign, the census work. We just got out of the, it feels like we still just got out of the Minneapolis comprehensive plan. So it's a juggling act to make sure that each significant conversation we're having that relates to policy decisions gets enough attention and support. So I just want to acknowledge that there's some constraints here, and I want to be able to support everyone in coming together to a good place. So from my perspective, I would feel comfortable delaying the framework adoption if it means we can have a little bit more time to perhaps build on the work that the staff direction Councilmember Cunningham is bringing forward to help us get that framework to a healthier spot of agreement with folks. I'm also okay approving it today, knowing that the staff direction that Councilmember Cunningham has here will likely address some of the concerns that were raised today, and hopefully we can get to a place where a lot of the concerns can be addressed. I do want to speak directly to the motion by Councilmember Gordon and offer an amendment, a friendly amendment to the motion by Councilmember Gordon, and it speaks to, I think, part of the reason why I would be.
I hadn't introduced it yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I heard you speak on it at the beginning.
Of these things?
Yeah.
I haven't moved to them yet.
Oh, okay. So I'll wait until you introduce it, but some of the things that relate to the motion that you might bring up later is this question around the funding that would be coming from the same pool of resources to support community-based organizations to do work. And so I think it's important for us as policymakers to understand the rationale for why that was presented. And I can speak to it from my Ninth Ward perspective, and having worked now for about 5 or 6 years with our neighborhood associations through an elected position perspective, is that I've had really amazing, robust neighborhood associations who leverage funding from other sources and deliver really strong programming and stand up for renters' rights and do this really amazing work. I've had other organizations who are in transition and are trying to find their footing when staff change. And then I've had other organizations that just can't seem to get it together. And so from that perspective, I do want to acknowledge that the resources available for neighborhood associations to me is really valuable and unique and important to preserve and to keep that way. Because it's not only a good way to engage democratically at the grassroots level, but it just generates so many jobs for our community members, for our neighbors, for the people that we build community with every day. And so I want us to have more time to really understand the rationale for that 25% moving into the CBO, community-based organization funding. And if we are going to make that move, to really figure out how we tailor that funding to support the initiatives the City Council is already working on, such as green zones, Upper Harbor, cultural districts, because otherwise we're just going to diffuse that funding and not have that collective impact that we can have when we really tighten up our lines of work and we really deliver and say these are the 3 racial equity impacts we want to have in our neighborhoods and our community. And so if the issue is just like, hey, we just want to have more money available to CBOs, then there's different sources for that, and we can have that conversation. If the issue is like, hey, the One Minneapolis Funds needs more resources, well, let's have a conversation between One Minneapolis and cultural districts, or One Minneapolis and green zones. I mean, there's just so many ways that I think we could really be weaving our story together, instead of what I'm feeling right now is just kind of like this diffuse approach at trying to reach a specific goal, but not having perhaps enough conversation here to get us there. So so again, you know, if we do get to the point of entertaining some other motions here today, I do want to just put this on the table, in that I'm a little uncomfortable making a decision on that component of having 25% of the resources to neighborhood associations go into CBOs without having a more clear, strategic, and measurable outcome that comes with that move. At the same time that we answer questions about the One Minneapolis Fund and the other policy work that we know will need funding through this year's budget cycle.
Thank you, Councilmember Cano. Next, we have Councilmember Gordon, followed by Council Vice President Jenkins.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. When I was assuming that we'd be considering the framework and voting on that, I did prepare some amendments because there were concerns that I had. So I wouldn't mind the opportunity to at least present the ideas that I was hoping that the committee could discuss, and possibly move it to even amend the framework. I just want to share the 3 ideas, especially because Councilmember Cano was talking about the third one. The 3 ideas I had of modifying the framework: the first one was to establish a minimum neighborhood allocation, which is the current minimum allocation we have of $25,000. The second one was establishing that the neighborhood day would be a voluntary option for neighborhood organizations. I know we at least heard one speaker speak about that and the complexities of it. My expectation would be that if it was voluntary and we pulled it off really well and we had the right date, more neighborhoods would want to participate in it, and we could test it out before it was a requirement. And the third item had to do with a concern that Councilmember Johnson raised, which is about that 25% that would automatically be cut out of the allocation I think we've all been expecting to go to neighborhood organizations. Was trying to reach a compromise, and it would say that establishing a requirement that community-based organizations that receive funding from this program must partner with a neighborhood organization. So the idea would be a neighborhood organization then would have to find a community organization, and they go back to get that 25% to complete the projects and implement that. That was trying to bridge a divide that I think still existed between the original framework and the other one. I know that it seems like there was even some support for that idea as well. Potentially that could be amended as well. I could try. I'm just not sure if I should wait to hear from Councilmember Jenkins before I understand which path to go down, because I'd be happy to move one or more of these amendments to the motion that I already made, and we could take those up as well. But perhaps with that said, I'll step back for a moment and let Councilmember Jenkins kind of give us her perspective on it, because I know we haven't heard from her yet.
Well, I, as the chair, would ask for you to make a motion on this, since it's a motion that's before us. So did you want to make a motion for amendment?
Well, I want to, I wouldn't mind taking one at a time as well, but I don't necessarily want to talk out of turn. So I'd like to wait and speak again after Councilmember Jenkins before we.
All right, Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. I hope I don't disappoint you, Councilmember Gordon. I'm not sure if I'm going to add a lot more perspective. You know, I would say having been engaged in these debates about neighborhood funding, neighborhood support, the importance of neighborhoods for a very long time, it saddens me that it's always a debate about us versus them. I live in Minneapolis. I live in a neighborhood. I've been engaged in many neighborhood organizations over a very significant period of time on all sides of town. I worked for the Northside Neighborhood Redevelopment Corporation. I served as the board chair of my own neighborhood organization, the Bryant Neighborhood. I was a board member of the Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association, and have worked on several projects with several neighborhood organizations throughout the city. The work that neighborhood organizations do is the work that we do here at the city council, and that is to make the city of Minneapolis a better place to live. And so it really disheartens me that this is always seemingly an adversarial relationship. And I hope that we all have the same goals, and that is to make our city the best city that it can be through a network of the 70 different neighborhoods that make up the city of Minneapolis. And yes, all of those neighborhoods are different and diverse, but they all make up the city of Minneapolis. You know, the challenges that I have seen in some of these neighborhood organizations is what I believe this framework is trying to address. I mean, there are neighborhood organizations right now today that have board chairs that have been there for decades with the same board members and achieving the same exact outcomes. I believe this framework is trying to help us move beyond that. And maybe you might say you can't force people into spaces that they don't want to be in. But we all live in this neighborhood, whether we can't move people out. And so I am supporting the framework with the staff direction that has been moved forward by Councilmember Cunningham. And just for clarity, because you initially stated that you wanted to delay, and so I'm not quite sure exactly what the motion is on the floor.
The current motion right now, the motion made by Councilmember Gordon is for the approval of the Neighborhoods 2020 framework recommendations. I have not made an official motion on my staff direction. I just read through it so folks would know.
Thank you.
All right, we have Councilmember Connell, then Gordon.
So I'm wondering if we can maybe take up the approval of the framework as one vote, and then the approval of the motion by Councilmember Gordon as a separate vote.
It's the same thing right now. It's currently the same thing right now, so he would need to make a separate motion for the amendments that he's bringing forward. So is that something you would?
Yeah, I would like to move to separate the two motions. So I would like to have us take the framework vote.
He hasn't made the motion yet for the amendment, so.
Just move.
Okay.
You can move my amendment.
Okay, sounds good.
The way you like.
Well,
You also don't have to make the motion if you would not like to.
yeah. So I wanted to make an amendment to his motion once he's ready to introduce the motion. So I'll remove myself from.
All right, Councilmember Gordon, you're up.
So I would like to move to amend the Neighborhoods 2020 framework as follows, to change three components of the framework. One, establishing the minimum neighborhood allocation at $25,000. Two, establishing Neighborhood Day as a voluntary option for neighborhood organizations to hold their annual board elections. And three, I would like to move Alejandro Cano's version of number 3. So it's not written before you, but you got it in your email. This would be establishing a preference that community-based organizations that receive funding from this program are encouraged to partner with a neighborhood organization, but will not be barred from receiving funding as long as the work completed meets our city's racial equity goals.
All right, so Councilmember Gordon has made the motion to amend the Neighborhoods 2020 framework as stated. We have Councilmember Johnson followed by Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to say that I appreciate these amendments. I agree with them, so I'll be supporting these amendments to the framework, and I appreciate Councilmember Cano's recommended changes as well. That said, I'll still be voting against approval of the framework, the underlying motion.
Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Councilmember Cunningham. I also echo Councilmember Andrews' position. I appreciate the friendly amendment adoption, and the intent of that is to acknowledge that I believe that part of the reason why the recommended funding allocation of 25% was brought forward was to help meet the goals of racial equity when some of the neighborhood associations were not able to demonstrate enough change in that direction. I think there's perhaps other ways that we can achieve that because, taking this chunk of money out of that same pool sort of inadvertently punishes all the neighborhood associations that have been doing good work in meeting those standards. And so I think we need more time to look into that, and that's why I'll be voting to not approve the framework today. But I will be supporting Councilmember Gordon's motion. Again, the notion here is that community-based organizations, if and when they do get funding through the same pool of resources, would be able to do work in this rubric as long as they're meeting racial equity goals, but would not be held back if there's any lack of collaboration at the neighborhood organization level, which we know is a dysfunctional component of some of this work that has happened and that is chronic in certain areas of our neighborhoods. And so we don't want to tie sort of those two things. We really want to be able to support both of those pieces of work moving forward without having to, stay locked out of the resources if there's deep entrenched white supremacy going on in some of the organizations that don't allow cultural voices to come in, or diverse voices to come in, or low-income neighborhood voices to come in, or renters' voices to come in. And some of us have seen this play out consistently over time. So that's the intent of the amendment that I made to Councilmember Gordon's motion. And again, we'll echo that. I feel similarly as Councilmember Andrew on this one. Andrew Johnson.
All right. So we have a motion on the table to amend the Neighborhoods 2020 framework. I will share. I overall support the intention. The concern that I have is when we talk about community-based organizations, it actually is cultural community organizations. And so as we talked about, with historically some neighborhood associations really perpetuating white supremacy in a lot of ways, that the onus should really be on neighborhood associations to work with cultural groups to be able to do that work. And so this kind of has that a little bit backwards. And but I understand and appreciate the underlying intention. I do not support the framework moving forward. However, the amending it to include these changes, I think will be helpful for the staff direction as Kira and carries this work forward. So that is why I will be voting yes for these amendments. So on that note, the motion is to amend the Neighborhoods 2020 framework. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. Now we are back to the underlying motion of approving the Neighborhoods 2020 recommended framework. Do I have any other discussion on that item? All right. Sorry, I'm going to pull this up here quick. All right, so based on that motion, all those in favor of passing the resolution approving the Neighborhoods 2020 Framework recommendations, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Nay. That item does not pass, and that item fails. Councilmember,
Call for a voice vote.
it was 3-3, but please, we will go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Jenkins.
Aye.
Councilmember Kano.
Nay.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Nay.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Nay.
That is 3 ayes and 3 nays.
As stated, that motion fails. Councilmember Gordon.
Move it forward without recommendation.
All right, so now we have a motion to move it forward without recommendation. Okay, so all those okay, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd vote no on that just because if, and actually maybe I'd ask Councilmember Gordon to consider holding off on that motion until we take a vote on the staff direction, because it would be my understanding that encapsulated in that staff direction would be working on the framework and coming back to us with an updated framework. And so to me, that would be putting the cart before the horse to move forward the framework even without recommendation to the full council, when the expectation is, should that staff direction pass, that we would be updating that framework anyways. So,
Councilmember Schrader.
I think Councilmember Johnson makes one good point and one I disagree with. I think that if we could move your staff direction first, I think there's a lot of support for that going forward. And then I think there was a distinction based on the 3-3 vote of approving the framework and not. So I think that keeping that still, having that vote would be good.
Would you like to respond to that?
So I'm comfortable voting on the staff direction, which I support first, but then I'd like to be able to move it forward without recommendation as well.
There are actually 2 motions that I would like to make, and then I will open that. So the first is I would like to move forward the staff direction that I have before folks today here. Again, to remind everyone, and I want to actually make a clarification because I accidentally put the wrong date. So the staff direction is Neighborhood and Community Relations Department, in partnership with Finance and Property Services staff and others as needed, are directed to do the following: collaborate with the University of Minnesota's Center for Urban and Regional Affairs to complete the resident-led process of furthering the Neighborhoods 2020 framework and developing program guidelines at the collaborate level of engagement based on the IAP2's spectrum. And this process is to be completed by October 28th, 2019. I apologize, I have the 26th. That's a Saturday. I don't think anybody wants to be here doing the work on Saturday, so we're going to put it on the 28th. So that motion is on the table. And I have Council Vice President Jenkins, followed by Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. I just want to note that, last year during our budget deliberations, we also had our 2040 plan at the same time. This proposal puts the 2020 plan right in the midst of our budget process as well. Just pointing that out.
Yes, this is something that I noted and think that we as a council hopefully can handle both at the same time, much the same as 2040. Council Member Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just really want to commend you and thank you for your leadership on bringing forward this staff direction, which I think is extremely responsive to what we've heard today and respects the work that so many people are doing around this. And I'm really optimistic about the results if we get this passed of how this could really bring about the best world for us and the best system possible.
Council Member Kano.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. I will be supporting this staff direction today, and I did want to add that to Councilmember Jenkins' point, it's true that this might be, kind of coupled with the budget process, and so there's nothing that prevents us from getting our work done sooner. We can certainly all try to do that together, and I think it would be smart for, our neighborhood association partners, CURA and NCR and others involved in this conversation to really try to get this figured out and not wait until the 28th for all these final details to come together. But I do think that we are incentivized to try to get this maybe wrapped up around August and September, having a robust conversation. And mostly it's because I think we are pretty close to finding a sweet spot. I don't think that there's a lot of things that we need to address. I think there's some key things that we need to get consensus on and perhaps do some negotiating around and some common path finding. But I do want to just say that we don't have to wait till the 28th. We can actually work with our chair and with other members of the city council to see if this is work that we want to be able to complete and bring forward before the timeline. But regardless, I do support the staff direction and feel comfortable with what's been outlined.
Thank you, Councilmember Kano. I just want to note that this staff direction actually aligns with NCR's proposed timeline that they already have. If the framework were to pass today, the guideline development process would be still aligned with this timeline. So I tried to make sure it wasn't too disruptive or extending it too long outside of those parameters. So, any other final? All right, seeing no further comments, I move approval of the staff direction. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. I have one other motion that I would like to make just to clean up the agenda, because the staff direction actually spoke to item 1.2, and so I would like to make the motion to strike 1.2 from the agendas. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. And Councilmember Gordon.
So I'd like to move 1.1 as amended forward without recommendation to the full council. Maybe speak to that just for a second.
Yes, please.
I think it would be, well, partly obviously, I want the council to take more responsibility for the framework. I wanted us to have something that we approved, and then it was our job to make sure we got right as we went through the staff direction process. I actually think getting something to take to committee of the whole and to discuss at the council could actually be enormously productive, just as I had the opportunity to put 3 amendments on the framework as it's going off to CURA and through that process. There might be other council members who'd also like to weigh in or touch that as it goes back through the process. So I think I would like to see it move forward without recommendation, and then we can deal with it then. And I'd appreciate that we'd give our colleagues that opportunity.
Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo Councilmember Gordon. I actually really like the idea of putting it forward without recommendation. I want to have this bigger debate. Just going back to my earlier comments, I feel like we need to. My one concern with getting more specific in the framework is as being part of neighborhood organizations, we're going to make it work. I think the neighborhood organizations are probably one of the most resilient, so no matter what the framework is going to come down to, with adequate funding and support, they're going to make it work for their neighbors. They have for years. That said, my concern is if we get into more specifics, I'm concerned we won't have the 13 votes. And frankly, when it comes down to it, I just want us to get to that, to really, as a city, confirm that neighborhoods are critical to this city.
Thank you, Councilmember Schrader. So I got clarification from the city clerk around the fact that actually the Could you please explain it?
Mr. Chair, it's my understanding, and I would need that clarification from you then, the staff directive you authored, which was approved, I believe, unanimously on a voice vote, was a substitute for item 1 and 2 under this issue. The item that was before us originally, the resolution that included the entire framework, was amended on voice vote, but then on final vote to pass the resolution as amended resulted in a tie vote. A tie vote means no action was taken. So that's effectively saying that this body did not act on the resolution despite amending it. Then in lieu of acting on that amended resolution, you adopted the staff directive, which suspends further action on the framework pending the completion of a whole list of work that's laid out in the staff directive. It would be contrary to that motion then to bring back the framework, which was already done.
All right, thank you for that clarification, Mr. Clerk. I will say that I believe that it is within the spirit of the staff direction that would be brought forward before the entire council for us to still have a conversation about neighborhood associations and for all of our colleagues to be able to partake in the conversation. I think that this still provides that space for us to have a robust conversation so that we can have a conversation out in the open with all of our colleagues. Kira will be taking note, NCR will be taking note, and this will be something that we'll be able to be bringing forward. Councilmember Gordon.
So it feels like I got duped and outsmarted. Because I had a motion before that we agreed to, and then there was a request that I pull that off so that there could be an opportunity to move the staff direction. And I said, that's fine with me as long as I can then bring my motion back. And it seemed like the chair was ruling that would be in order. I've seen us many times pass something fail on a tie vote and we move it forward to the council without recommendation. I read the staff direction and it even refers to furthering the neighborhood's 2020 framework. It doesn't say furthering a neighborhood's 2020 framework as recommended staff final report of this date. It just says the framework. We tweaked and amended a framework that's now in limbo because it got held up in the committee. So I guess I'll be, if you rule it out of order now, I just wanted to put it on the record that I thought you said we could still entertain my motion when I agreed to table it and pull it back, and now I'm a little disappointed that you're ruling that it's out of order and we can't even move it forward without recommendation. We could vote 3-3 and that would die again, and so then it would just be held in limbo. I'll also, I'm assuming when we get to the council, if people don't want it to go forward too, they can refer it back to committee. So it wasn't moved as a the staff direction wasn't moved as a substitute, but so I think I've done my, sorry you guys had to be exposed to me complaining and crabbing so much, but that's just the way I was feeling and I thought I'd share that with all of you.
So I will admit that was my bad as the chair. There was no duping that happened, so I sincerely apologize. That's why Mr. Clerk swooped in and was like, just so you know. So I apologize.
Unintentional.
Yes.
It was a feeling. I wasn't saying you
yes.
did it.
No, I do sincerely apologize, though. That was not the intention, was to dupe you or outsmart you. I wish that I had those kind of smarts to do it. But all right. So we have this. So we have already passed the staff direction, and according to the clerk, it is out of order for us to then reconsider moving it forward without recommendation. It has essentially died. The resolution as is, so item 1. And so what we'll be bringing forward for further conversation to the rest of the committee will be the staff directions that I have before us. So did you want to speak more on that? Okay.
Thanks for listening anyway.
Councilmember Schrader?
Sure, what I did here today was all of us in unison talking about the importance of neighborhoods. So as we continue that conversation, I just urge us to push to find how we're going to make that work.
And I will say also that it is 100% within the spirit of the staff direction that neighborhood organizations live. As we're... I think that, that there's concerns around, like, what does this mean for the budget, or what does this mean for neighborhoods, and it is within it that A, they continue to exist, and B, that they are funded. And so, so just wanting to name that as a part of the staff direction. So with no further comments before us, I just also want to take a moment to say thank you to NCR staff. This has been so much time and energy. I'm very grateful for you all. You gave us an amazing baseline to be able to further with the partnership of Cura. So thank you so much. And I also want to thank everybody for being here today, for speaking your truth, for naming, for speaking truth to power, and for naming really what is just the truth, which is grassroots organizing that happens place-based through neighborhood organizations is vital to the vitality and the future of our city. My graduate degree is in civic engagement, and I actually got to study NRP as a part of my graduate degree. So that just goes to show how impactful and recognized neighborhood associations are from the city of Minneapolis. So I thank you all so much for being here. And with no further business before this committee, we are adjourned.